Good evening, everyone. My name is Fred Costello. We're presiding over this evening's meeting agenda. Please join the town clerk, Lisa Stanley, in the Pledge of Allegiance.
States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We have privilege of the floor this evening. Representatives from Key Capture, who have proposed a battery energy storage system on Thompson's Drive, have come here to share some information about the project they're proposing. We're going to give them privilege of the floor for 20 minutes or so. They have agreed to do some question and answers. I'll remind you all, when you ask questions, be respectful, don't disrupt or shout across the room. Direct your comments to us. Your thoughts and comments are for our benefit to help us in our decision-making process. So try to have a respectful evening and learn at least a little bit from one another. So with that, I'll call Paul Williamson from Key Capture to the microphone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Supervisor Costello and to the board for allowing us to come before you tonight. My name is Paul Williamson.
Paul, the microphones are directional, so if you speak directly into it, it'll be a little bit helpful. There you go.
Is that an improvement?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start again. Thank you again very much to Supervisor Costello and to the town board for allowing us to come before you this evening.
This meeting is being transcribed and summarized.
My name again is Paul Williamson. I'm the lead developer for this project for Key Capture Energy. I've been with Key Capture Energy since 2021, and the information that we will be providing to you tonight is consistent with the same information that we have been provided through our permit application with the Town Planning Board. With me tonight is Key Capture Energy's Executive Vice President of Technology, Joel Baiduna, and Joel is going to speak with you and present information about the status of energy technology operations and safety operations, particularly as applied to the project that we're proposing here in town. I do want to make note that I have seen a number of different comments that have been sent to the town and also posted on Facebook that are related to a number of different types of projects and issues that have happened around the world. Of all of those comments, very few of them are actually in reference to this project. This project has a different type of chemistry, or those other projects that have been referred to have different types of chemistry, different construction types, different different methodology for standards, codes, and safety operations. Joel is going to go through this information tonight, and what I encourage everybody here in the audience and at the board to do is to please keep your focus on the proposed project rather than focus on other types of projects and other types of battery systems that are not applicable to this project. Thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you, Supervisor and board members, for having me tonight. As Paul mentioned, my name is Joel Baiduna, and I lead the technology team at Key Capture Energy. As a little bit of background, I'm an engineer by training, and I've worked on somewhere close to 300 of these energy storage systems across the world at this point over the last 10 years. But I have been more broadly involved in the energy and power industries for the last 22 years. I am an engineer by training, but in a past life, I was an industrial rescue technician and a firefighter for the power industry. And you kind of see that come through as we talk a little bit about the fire safety elements tonight. I do appreciate the privilege of the floor, but this is going to be a lot to cover in 20 minutes. And what we cover tonight is only going to be a subset of all the topics that I know people are interested in. When we do submit our application eventually, we will cover all the topics that people are interested in to a greater depth than tonight. That being said, after I get through this, I'm happy to field questions related to anything that people would like to discuss tonight. Some of you have a copy of my presentation today. Feel free to share it amongst the tables. I know we don't have a version for everyone, but I'll let you know when I'm turning the page so that you can follow along. So the topics that we will be covering today include an overview of the technology, an introduction on fire safety as it relates to battery energy storage systems, and we're going to talk about sound and noise a little bit since that's been a topic of concern, and then I'll open it up to questions. So if you go to the energy storage system basics section, one of the first questions we get is why energy storage is necessary and why now? And I think the best way to think about this is in the context of other industries and systems. And when you really think about it, any industry that's out there or any physical system needs a form of storage as a buffer. So some examples are department stores that need warehouses, stormwater needs retention ponds to hold it temporarily, computers need hard drive, so on and so forth. And really up until about the 2010s, the electric power industry was the only industry or system where the supply of electricity and the demand for electricity needed to be instantaneously balanced, or else you would have a blackout. There's no other industry that's like that because you need a form of buffer when things or electrons flow from one place to another. So when this technology became available, the industry jumped on it because it solved a problem that we had been dealing with since the invention of electricity and was really useful. So if you think about the history of this, and I'm flipping the page again, even though it is new to this community, it is not new technology. The lithium-ion battery was first invented in 1976 by Exxon, and then it really started to be commercialized en masse in 1991 when Sony put it in camcorders and other consumer electronics devices they were selling in the early 1990s. And it eventually came to replace some of the other batteries that we were more familiar with, like NiCad and alkaline and things like that. Then in the early 2000s, telecom companies that run cell towers or other radio antennas, and they needed a source of backup electricity, they started replacing legacy lead-acid battery banks with lithium-ion, and the technology got a little bit better. And then in 2009, a utility called AES deployed the first grid-scale energy storage system using lithium-ion batteries, where they used it just like we use them today. They charged when there was an excess of electricity, and they discharged their battery when there wasn't enough electricity. And then somewhere around 2013 is when the technology became cheap enough, and the technology was safe enough and mature enough, where the industry really took off with hockey stick-like exponential growth. And now if you fast forward to today, there's about 6,000 utility-scale systems, so big batteries worldwide, and about 1,000 of those are in the United States. And if you kind of look at the growth of this industry, no matter what country or region you look at, that number is expected to double in the relatively near future. There's a couple of reasons for that. I'm happy to discuss that versus alternative technologies or things like that. But that's a little bit about the history, where we are today, and where the technology is expected to go. If you go to the next page, this summarizes some of the components going from left to right, building your way up, that go into a modern battery energy storage system. So on the far left, we have the raw materials. A lot of these are what we call base metals, like aluminum, copper, or iron. We also have carbon, various different types of plastics, phosphate, lithium salts, and solvents. Those raw materials get built into battery cells. Battery cells come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. The ones that you are probably most familiar with are things like AAAs, AA's, A's, D cells, things like that. A lot of household batteries take like a cylindrical shape. The batteries that we use are shaped like a rectangular prism. You can hold them in your hand. They weigh a few pounds. And that's the building block of these systems. Multiple of those cells are then put into what we call modules. If you've ever looked at like a server rack or an audio rack, not super different than what's in the corner there, that is a rack, and there's modules worth of equipment that are inside there. Battery modules are very similar to that. And then we take those racks and we put them into containers. The vast majority of modern systems have a container that looks like a 20-foot shipping container, which is used to bulk transport goods around the world on container ships. There's a few reasons why that is the form factor of choice, but I would say 90% plus of the systems that are out there, they're just going to look like a field full of shipping containers. And then we take those blocks and we arrange them into arrays, depending on the project size we're looking to obtain. put them on land to form system, which is what the far right picture is. That is one of our operating projects near Buffalo, New York. If you turn the page again, this is one of our larger projects. This is a 100 megawatt project that has the ability to discharge for 2 hours. The project we are proposing here is roughly double that size. And I would say in the grand scheme of project sizes, what we have proposed here in Saugerties is about average with what you'll see out there. There are some that are much, much bigger, and there's not many that are smaller these days. So the project size we propose is pretty typical. And if you're trying to visualize what it might look like, it would be like this photo, but roughly double the number of containers of what you're looking at here. And like I mentioned before, you can kind of see it just looks like a bunch of shipping containers sitting next to each other. So if you turn 2 pages, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of energy storage safety. There's a lot of different ways that safety statistics can be framed. Sometimes they can be done so disingenuously, and there's different ways it can be done to serve different purposes. So what we've done here is we've kind of framed the safety statistics in a way that we think is the least disingenuous and you know, what will resonate with most. However, there's a lot of different ways that you can measure this, and we acknowledge that. But if you work from top to bottom on the page, it is one of the safest technologies available today. And if you dig into the incident rates of this technology, it's very similar to any other device that generates, transmits, stores, or uses electricity, in that the risk will never be zero, but it's quite low, once again, kind of no matter how you measure the statistics. On the second bullet there is an industry database from the Electric Power Research Institute which keeps track of the incidents that do happen worldwide. And on that, there's about 25 incidents at utility scale, so bigger projects, generally defined as 20 megawatts and above, across the roughly 6,000 systems that have been deployed worldwide. If you look at smaller systems that are deployed at what are known as commercial and industrial scale, so these might be batteries that are on the side of Home Depots or Walmarts or things like that, but it doesn't include residential batteries. There's tens of thousands of those in the world, and they do measure when they have had thermal incidents in the past, and there's been about roughly 100 incidents for those tens of thousands of systems. The industry, when I first started in it, there wasn't a set of rules by which we operated. There wasn't any standardized designs, there weren't any codes and standards that governed what we did, and we used our best judgment to figure out how to deploy these on the grid. And to be honest, that's how any new industry starts, right? You do your best to do it safely and efficiently, and then you learn lessons over time. And our industry was no different. And I would say there was a massive inflection point in our industry was around 2018. That was when the first major incident occurred and firefighters got hurt. It was in Surprise, Arizona. 2 firefighters got badly hurt. Nobody was killed. But that was an incident where unfortunately something really badly happened, but we learned a lot from that incident. And if you fast forward today, mostly due to that one single incident, but iterative learnings across, amongst other incidents have also occurred, and we have robust codes and standards that govern everything we do. So that's one of the reasons why most of these systems, regardless of the manufacturer, look the same. It's one of the reasons why they have the same features. It's one of the reasons why they use the same chemistry. And it's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of alternative technologies being deployed, because one, they're either uneconomic, they take up a lot more land, they have safety issues in and of themselves, they may not be financeable, or they may not be insurable. But in any case, if you look at the incident rates, and the Electric Power Research Institute on their website does have some statistics to this effect, what you'll see is that incident rates, no matter how you want to measure them, per operating hour, per megawatt hour, really plummeted starting in 2018. And so while these incidents do occasionally happen, as anything that generates, transmits, stores, or uses electricity has the potential to do, I think when you dig into it, you'll find that the chance of an incident happening is quite low. Here in New York State, we actually have the most robust fire code in the nation. So I would say in any of the other 49 states, where we operate in about 18 of them, as far as development and operational assets, there's really robust codes and standards. Here in New York, the New York State Fire Code takes all of those and is layered on top of it, and it now has the strictest safety rules in the nation. So when you dig into it, what you'll find is that just like how codes and standards starting in 2018 really started to ramp up and are now very robust, what you'll find is that the majority of events that do happen are in systems that were deployed prior to 2020, which may not have had those best practices, lessons learned, and codes and standards applied to them yet. And there's a couple reasons for that. Older energy storage systems used cobalt-based chemistries. We use lithium iron phosphate batteries, as does the majority of the industry. Cobalt-based chemistries are what are in your cell phones, the laptops that are on your table. It's what are in, the majority of electric vehicles, but that's changing over time. Most lithium-ion batteries are cobalt-based, and they are more likely to enter into thermal runaway than lithium iron phosphate for a variety of reasons, which we can get into in depth if you'd like, but it can get pretty into the weeds. And that's why the industry switched away from that technology. What we also saw in the early systems is that we were designing one-off systems using parts and pieces from different manufacturers, and when a project got brought online, it was the first project to ever have that individual configuration. And anytime you're deploying serial number one of a widget or a project, you're more likely to have issues because no matter how many smart engineers or other people you have working on that project, there's just going to be things that get missed. What we are seeing now, and one of the reasons once again why everything looks like a 20-foot shipping container, is no product that we deploy hasn't already been deployed a couple hundred times before. So yes, those products are designed by smart engineers, and yes, they have to be tested in a variety of different ways in certified laboratories. But I think more importantly, when a project comes to this community or any other community, or a product goes into a project in this community or any other community, it's going to be far from the first time that we or anybody else has deployed that specific energy storage system. The other thing that has changed is that the duration at which these batteries can run is longer. And that's really important for a couple reasons. In early systems, sometimes they only had the ability to discharge for 15 minutes. Now, it's more typical that they discharge for 4 hours or more. The reason why that is important is if you think of a battery like a balloon, where you can put air in and out of a balloon, or you can put electrons in and out of a battery, very similar things happen when you blow up a balloon quickly and multiple times versus when you do it slowly. So if I rapidly inflate a balloon with an air compressor and then I do it a couple hundred times, I'm going to fatigue that rubber and eventually that balloon's going to pop. But if I inflate it with my mouth and I do it a little bit slower and I maybe don't do it so rapidly, the rubber in the balloon is going to be more resilient to that and it's not going to be as likely to pop. The anode of a battery, which is made of carbon and is the part of a battery that stores electrons, is very similar. When you put electrons into an anode, it actually physically gets a little bit bigger, because electrons have mass. When you take electrons out of that anode, it gets a little bit smaller. So if you're cramming all those electrons into a battery and taking them out over 15-minute periods versus 4 hours plus like modern systems, the materials don't fatigue to the same extent, and they are far less likely to have a thermal runaway incident as a result. And then lastly, what I would say is if you dig into the incidents that have happened, and there have been ones that have happened here in the US, and there have been ones that have happened here in the state of New York, what you'll find is that the vast majority of them were in international locations where they have not yet adopted the robust codes and standards that were first adopted here in the United States. That is changing quickly with many things. The United States takes leadership on things like this, and then the rest of the world follows when it comes to technical standards. That is very similar for energy storage as well. But if you dig into those 25 utility scale incidents or 100 commercial industrial incidents, you'll find most of them didn't happen here. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is when these early incidents happen, first responders may not have known the battery was there. They certainly weren't trained on what to do if that battery had a thermal runaway incident, and oftentimes bad things would happen as a result of that. Now we know exactly what happens when a thermal runaway incident occurs, as rare as they may be. We know exactly what to tell the firefighters to do, and all choice for a project's developer and operator has been taken out of the equation. There are state, federal, and international codes in place that we have to follow on projects that we develop that state exactly where, when, and how, and on what content we have to train the local fire service. And that training happens before we operate. It happens for the local fire department and all mutual aid organizations that may help out, and it happens on a continual basis. And the goal is to make sure that at a minimum, the incident commander that will respond to an incident on any given shift from any different mutual aid organization or the primary fire service will know exactly what to do. And we recognize that people will turn over in these organizations and there's different shifts, and that's why we'll provide as much training as necessary, and we don't really have a choice. We have to under the codes and standards that govern us. Turning the page again, there has been some federal guidance on this, so I would say in addition to the state of New York, the Trump administration has also dug in a little bit into energy storage systems, and the EPA put out some of their findings based off of the incidents that have happened about a year ago at this point. And a link to the PDF for this document is at the bottom of this page if you want to type in that entire web address. But what we've done is we've taken out some of the key quotes from it. So the document highlights the value that energy storage provides to ensure grid reliability, and it states, and I quote, "Battery energy storage systems stabilize the electric grid, ensuring a steady flow of power to homes and businesses, regardless of fluctuations from varied energy sources or other disruptions." The document also acknowledges the rareness of incidents, like I've spoken about tonight, and that most incidents are from the early systems, like I've spoken about tonight. And I quote, "Improvements in BESS quality and design have led to a decrease in the number of failure incidents since 2020. BESS failure incidents have decreased." And then it also talks a little bit about the world's largest fire that has ever happened. It happened at a facility called Moss Landing in Northern California. And when you Google battery fire dangers, or anything similar, this information on this incident is often what will come up. And it says, and I quote, "Air quality monitoring and sampling occurred during and after the fire and found no risk to public health." So when it comes to gases and smoke that can be produced, this is something we will talk about in depth when we submit our application, and we will bring in the world's foremost laboratories and experts that measure what is in the gases, what's in the smoke, and how they model that in the context of a specific project. And we will also present the data that has been collected at every real-world incident in the United States that, once again, you can kind of Google and learn about. Because for all of those, the fire service set up gas monitoring, and so we know what those findings were, and that will all be presented as part of our application as well. The document also provides guidance on permitting for bodies such as planning commissions and boards, training, firefighting, PPE, and turnout gear, installation incident response, which is also governed very heavily by the state of New York, and decommissioning, what we do at the end of life of these batteries. And I think, just to put a pin in it, all of our projects are fully compliant with the requirements in this document, the guidelines of New York State, and any other federal, state, and local regulation that is applicable to our projects. So turning the page again to put a pin in this and to summarize, energy storage incidents are rare and becoming rarer. The incidents that have occurred are overwhelmingly in older systems with outdated chemistries, designs, and safety features. There are now robust code standards and guidelines for these modern BESS systems. Modern BESS has several layers of safety, such that when the incidents happen, they are typically small. And we can talk about why they're small now versus some of the bigger ones you've seen in the news if you'd like. The large incidents, particularly large burning buildings, have never happened in these smaller modular systems that we deploy today. Key Capture Energy has never supported putting batteries inside of buildings for a long list of reasons, and we don't to this day. Luckily, the industry has come around to our way of thinking, and we don't do that anymore. But the way that thermal runaway incidents occur, how big they can get, and the emergency response related to that is also much different for these smaller systems than some of the larger building-based systems you've seen in the past. Without a doubt, gases can be produced before combustion occurs. Smoke can occur after combustion occurs. And the smoke is toxic, like all smoke. And once again, we can get into what's in that smoke, what are in those gases. We can compare that to other fires, and we will provide detailed modeling as part of our application done by the world's foremost experts. There's also a defined and legally required procedure on how to respond to these incidents. So we have already interfaced with the chief. He will know what to do, his team will know what to do, and anybody that's on his team from day one or over time will be continually trained on what to do if there was an incident here. All right, the last topic that I'll cover today, which like I said is one of many topics that we'll eventually cover, but it's one that we've been getting a lot of questions on, is BESS project noise. So if you flip to slide 13, our starting point is always a noise ordinance in a community. And in general, they're pretty similar across the nation. Here in Saugerties, it requires a maximum of 17 decibels at the property line. Just like all the studies I talked about that we do on other topics, we do those for sound as well. So we use qualified acoustic engineers. They model it to what's known as the ISO 9613-2 international standard, which is very specific on how you measure the sound, how you model it, and it takes into account everything. Trees, humidity, temperature, prevailing winds, where the noise comes from, what direction it's going, things like that. With our conservative spacing and setbacks that we deploy at Key Capture Energy, which are typically several hundred feet, which is way more than what the code requires, we just don't have issues complying with sound. We've never gotten a complaint at any of our operational facilities, and because we are always siting these several hundred feet away from the next sensitive receptor, and because we don't build brand new substations, we site these projects adjacent to existing substations, it is generally imperceptible to hear the noise from our battery next to the existing substation that was already there, and the tonal quality that comes off the noise that our batteries produce is generally less annoying than what is already in the community from that substation. And so we've done our preliminary modeling. It will be submitted as part of our application. We will at one point bring in an acoustic engineer to speak about that, and we are more than happy to have our findings analyzed by third-party sound engineers or anybody else that the municipality would like to take to look at it. But what you can see is that at the property line, we're between 50 and 70 decibels. We have kind of an oddly shaped property line, and so at certain points it's 50, at certain points it's 70. And so at the worst case scenario, it's somewhere between roughly the noise of conversation and a car. And if it's operating at full power and you're at the far end of the property line, it's going to be something more faint, somewhere like a refrigerator and rain. If you model it to the closest dwelling, which is several hundred feet away, you are at 50 decibels or less. And that is at full power under the worst case scenario, in other words, the loudest situation in which the battery may operate. If you flip the page, even though decibels are oftentimes what gets focused on and how loud something is, pitch and tone are really important considerations. And so while we will find that the focus of noise ordinances is often really focused on decibels, the pitch or the frequency of that noise and the tone or the quality of that noise is really important when it comes to what is annoying to the human ear or the ears of animals that have ears similar to humans. And what you'll find is that like high frequency noises like a whistle or alarm, it invokes a stress reaction in the body. And low frequency noises like heavy machinery or a subwoofer, they will vibrate, they permeate surfaces like walls, and they can be felt by the human body. The primary noise that comes from energy storage is from the cooling fans. Those cooling fans are very similar to commercial HVAC equipment. And so if you've ever stood outside a Walmart or a department store or a grocery store on a hot day, and you listen to the air conditioners that are on the roof, the noise is going to be very similar to that. And if you were to visit an operating BESS facility, including those here in New York, that would be the noise you hear is like a whooshing noise like an HVAC fan. The pitch and tone are measured by our original equipment manufacturers, and that data does go into our sound studies. And once again, we'd be more than happy to have third parties on behalf of the municipality review that analysis so that you can ascertain not just the volume, but the pitch and tonal characteristics as well. And once again, because there's already a substation there that is operating at high voltage, we operate at medium voltage, so the noise is a little bit different. The buzzing that exists in the community from the high voltage substation, which does fall within that more annoying tonal and frequency range, that is going to be what people hear. It's what they've always heard in the community because we don't site these just in green fields. And so what we'll typically find, like I mentioned before, is that we don't get complaints and it's just imperceptible by the community because of how we site these projects. So with that, I'm happy to cover anything else you'd like me to cover. I'm happy to take any questions on any topic. So I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So they've agreed to do some Q&A. We'll have you raise your hands. Try it without a microphone, but it might be better.
Sure.
All right, we're going to try it without microphones.
Okay.
And then we'll try to acknowledge everybody raising their hand. And when you ask your question, please make it a question. This is for everyone's benefit. I think a lot of us know how we feel or what our perceptions might be. But for tonight, let's try to make this educational for everyone. So ask a specific question relevant to the topic and may be beneficial to all of our understanding. All right.
And Supervisor, do you want questions addressed to you, and do you want me to address you, or would you rather I address the question asker?
And I think you can do it.
Okay.
And then.
Great.
Okay.
If you could just repeat the question.
Yeah, so in some town boards and some planning commissions,
No, sorry, I meant when you get questions, if you could.
Oh, yeah, of course, good idea, for sure.
Before I start with the audience, did someone from the board want to ask a question?
It's not really a question, but I didn't realize until your last comments that the substation is pre-existing on site, if there's any noise that comes from it.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and it depends on a lot of things. It depends on how humid it is. So you'll notice that on humid days, it's louder than on non-humid days. You'll notice on hotter days where the cooling fans and the equipment is just more generally operating at a higher level because people are running their air conditioners, so there's more electricity running through it and the cooling fans on it are running harder. You'll find that it's louder then as well. You'll also find that you perceive it as louder at night versus the day just because there's less background noise at night. Yes, sir.
The technology seems to be, I get the impression, battery technology is proceeding very rapidly.
Yes.
We've been asked, it looks like iron batteries, I think sodium batteries,
Yep.
perhaps have a better, lower frequency of thermal runaway. So what about new technology? What about using something other than the technology?
Sure.
Proposing?
So lithium-ion batteries are really special due to lithium itself and where lithium sits on the periodic table of the elements. And there are certain aspects of lithium that make it such that no other technology can accomplish what it can accomplish with the same efficiency, at the same cost, or in the same amount of space. Relative to battery siting in local communities, the space element is pretty pertinent. The next best technology from a space usage perspective is sodium ion. And in 3 to 5 years, I do believe that sodium ion will be a technology that is available, but at a bare minimum, it will take at least 50% more land. Today's systems take at least double the amount of land. On top of that, it is a myth that sodium ion does not go into thermal runaway or does not catch fire. When we go through our planning commission application, if we really want to go down this rabbit hole, the fire consultant we use, they're called Fire Risk Alliance. They're the world's premier expert in all things battery fire safety. They have fire protection engineers and firefighters on staff. They also run what's called a NERDL, a nationally recognized testing laboratory. And they test every battery that goes onto the market. They won't give you specific names or models due to non-disclosure reasons, but they will testify that sodium-ion batteries do go into thermal runaway. The properties of it is a little bit different than ours, but to say that sodium-ion is a safer technology is not true. When it comes to things like iron air batteries from companies such as Forum Energy, that is technology that works. However, it is devastatingly low efficiency. So for our technology, for 85% of the electrons that go in come out. For an iron air battery, you're lucky if it's like 35%. So if I'm trying to absorb excess electricity in the state of New York when it has it, or discharge energy when it doesn't have enough, and I'm losing 70% of those electrons, that increases costs for ratepayers such as everyone in this room, and it's generally inefficient. That being said, iron air is useful. So if you need to store electricity for greater than 12 hours at a time, that is the technology you want to use, but it takes up a lot of land. At least 10 times as much land to accomplish the same goal as what we do, much lower efficiency. So we actually don't view iron air and lithium ion as competitors because they're actually solving different electrical problems for the grid. We aren't currently developing any iron air projects, and it wouldn't make economic sense to use that here because it would end up being like a 5 megawatt battery versus what we proposed, and that's not useful to the community or the state. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I just want to make a real quick comment before we go on to further questions. Joel mentioned a couple of times that referenced different types of technical reports that will be made as part of our application. I just want to note that those reports have actually already been filed with our application. Everything that he previously mentioned, we have filed the full permit application with responses to the planning board. That's all available for public record, with the the exception of one report that we expect next week, and that's a report that's basically a plume modeling study that'll demonstrate what happens to any exhaust should there be a fire incident, and how far and what direction might that exhaust travel in. That report is the last report that we have to submit, and it won't be completed until next week. So I just wanted to make note of that. Thank you. Thank you.
My probably simplified or simple understanding of the utilization of battery storage is that and I think you referred to this, is that they are charging during periods of time when power is cheaper and discharging when it's more expensive
Correct.
or more scarce, I guess.
They're one and the same. So the way that you translate electrical engineering needs on the grid into an economic signal that people react to is exactly as you mentioned. When there's not enough electricity, the price goes up to incentivize technologies of all types to discharge or generate, and when there's an excess of it, the price goes down.
Can you anticipate the sort of frequency for this particular system of charge-discharge? Is it night and day, or is it much more frequent than that?
Yeah, we can, and it changes over time. So when we choose where we site energy storage projects, what we're doing is we're looking at the flow of electrons at various different points on the grid today, and what they'll look like 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, 15 and 20 years into the future. That is data that is made available to critical infrastructure companies. It's not data I can share with you because it is considered a national security issue, and we have a special license that allows us to do that. But regulated utilities and independent power producers like us have access to that data, and we see where the electrons flow today, all the way up to, like I said, 20 years from now. And what we're trying to do is get ahead of problems. Because if you start having brownouts or blackouts in a community, and then you go, okay, now I'm going to start a 5-year process to develop, build, and commission a battery, well, that's politically unacceptable, and it's just not how the power grid operates, right? You can't go through a period of unreliability. So one of the reasons we cited a battery here and how we cite all of our batteries is we're looking for a problem that is expected to occur 3 to 5 years in the future. And we'll cite our batteries there. Does that answer the question?
So it's interesting, but not exactly.
Okay.
I was wondering more what the utilization.
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't complete the thought.
Yeah.
So when we initially bring this battery online, it's unlikely to do really large charge-discharge cycles. What it's likely to do is provide what's known as frequency regulation, where it's looking at moment-to-moment supply and demand imbalances of electricity, and it kind of flutters about, rapidly changing between charging and discharging, but rarely at 100%. And so it might be operating at like 30% for all 24 hours of a day, and the amount of noise it produces and things like that is proportionally lower as a result of that. Over time, depending on what the energy mix of New York State looks like in the future, it can go a couple different directions. So if you end up with a large build out of solar energy in the state of New York, as has happened in Texas and as has happened in California, what you'll start to see is that as the sun comes up and solar starts producing electricity, you increase the amount that you charge, because at a certain point there tends to be more solar electricity than can be used by the grid, and that energy is free because solar panels don't use any fuel that costs money to generate electricity. So we will typically charge from solar energy in states like California and Texas in the middle of the day when the sun is up at $0 for electricity. Then when the sun goes down, but people come home and they turn on their appliances and generally use more electricity, then we start discharging electricity. And at that point the price is much higher because there's no solar anymore, but we can discharge that solar that we charged from earlier. The same is true of wind. There's generally more wind at night than there is during the day, and so in wind-heavy areas, you'll see that you charge a little bit more at night versus the day. So to answer your question directly, initially it's going to be like little fluttering to maintain frequency and grid reliability, and then no matter how the mix of the state's energy supply changes over time, the battery's going to do something useful, but it might look a little bit different.
Sorry, one follow-up is that I think I understand that the utilization is dictated by the ISO agency initially, by the needs of the grid, and that the operator doesn't have the discretion to utilize the batteries in a specific way until further down the road.
It's complicated, but that's not quite true.
Okay.
So the electrical needs are determined by the grid operator. Those electrical needs are then transformed into capitalist signals to cause people to want to make money to solve those electrical problems. And who actually tells us to charge and discharge, without a doubt, that is the grid operator. However, we can sell a couple different services for that. So for example, that initial fluttering about I mentioned, where you're just maintaining the frequency of the grid, we get paid a fixed price for that, and then the grid operator tells us when to go up, when to go down on a millisecond to millisecond basis. However, we do have choice. So for example, if we need to take the unit down for maintenance, we could tell the grid operator, hey, we don't want to provide this service right now because we're doing maintenance. There's a very defined procedure how to do that, and that is us choosing not to do something. We can also purposefully do something uneconomic if we really wanted to, but we wouldn't do that, right? So if the grid is telling us, hey, we need you to charge, I can actually make the decision to discharge if I want. Nobody does that, it's dumb. But I don't necessarily need to do what the grid operator tells me, but everybody does, or else you would very quickly lose money. There are emergency scenarios though, where the grid operator, and there's mechanisms, they differ around the country and around the world, where they say, I don't care what you do or don't want to do, you must do this because it's required for security of the grid. But it's complicated.
I have a question,
Yep.
and this might be a silly question, but if the batteries, let's say you're up on Thompson Road, the unit is there, the substation is next to it, okay? So is the substation going to have a computer reading that says, oh, we need more power, and then it's gonna hook into that particular battery storage area? So in other
Yeah.
words, what would be here on Thompson Road would only be serving this substation?
Yeah, so
Or
not
is
a
it
dumb
gonna
question
go
at all.
out to all over the Hudson Valley?
Electrically, our project is connected to that existing substation. It's what we call POI, or point of interconnection. However, the grid is one big machine. In the United States, we have an East Coast grid, a West Coast grid in Texas, because Texas always wants to, preserve the ability to secede from the Union. It's actually the true history of it, right? And so there are electrons in Florida that make their way to New York, and there are electrons in New York that make their way to Florida, but electricity follows the path of least resistance. So whether we're charging or discharging, the source or sink, so charging a source, discharging a sink for electricity, it's going to follow the laws of physics, which means it goes to it either charges from the nearest available source or discharges to the loads that are nearby. So the majority of benefit does happen geographically close, but the grid is one big machine by design, and it is simultaneously true that our project will most benefit the local community electrically, but we're also helping in a little bit of a sense, ratepayers in Florida as well.
Thank you. All right, I keep seeing people pop up their hands. Mr. Barr and Mr. Arvino are in the west side of the room. They're going to start with those tables, work their way through, and we'll gradually move forward. And we'll try to have a productive period of questions and answers. Mr. Arvino, I think you hand out the microphone first.
Hi, can you address the jobs and economic benefits that the project may bring?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it qualitatively, and then Paul, if you want to put some numbers behind it, put me on the spot, feel free. The majority of economic benefit from a jobs perspective is during construction, right? And we recognize that those are temporary. When it comes to full-time operation, it is not a manned facility, but very similar to the substation that's next to it, it does require maintenance. And so, I don't know, 2 or 3 times per week, there will be 2 guys in a truck that show up and service an air conditioner or, do vegetation management, something like that. And they do tend to live closer to the facility, but we are not going to pretend that we're a major job creator because, we hired 4 local technicians to work on it. Paul, is there anything you want to add as far as broader economic benefits and maybe dollar signs if you got it on top of your mind?
Yeah, sure. So just in regards to the jobs, I'll follow up on that too. a system this size is gonna be the equivalent of approximately 30, give or take, full-time jobs during the year and a half of construction. And those would all be unionized jobs. In fact, earlier today, we met with the local union to talk a little bit about how our agreement with them might shape as we go forward. In regards to financial, other financial benefits, Joel already noted that one of the major benefits of putting energy storage on the grid is it does create rate suppression. Now, that doesn't mean that you specifically are going to see a line item change on your electricity bill. But as in New York State, the policy continues to grow and expand a fleet of energy storage systems across the state, it creates a suppression effect on utility rates and will help keep utility rates lower for all New Yorkers. So there's number one benefit. And then number two benefit is more direct to the local community. We will be seeking a tax agreement with the town and county. That tax agreement will have the implication, or the objective, I should say, the objective of creating tax stabilization both for the project and also for the community. And so in that, we'll be seeking to come up with an agreeable assessment and evaluation method. We'll look in that agreement to lock that in for the life of the project. And so it'll be actually a set payment, steady over the number of years, or actually probably increasing over the number of years. There's a couple of different reasons why we pursue that agreement. Number one, it's better for the community versus having rapid depreciation where we would pay a whole lot of taxes upfront for the first several years and then suddenly the taxes drop off very rapidly and there wouldn't be as many taxes in the future. It creates certainty for both the community and also for the project, so that every 3 or 4 years, if there's a reassessment, the parties aren't coming together in litigation, which just burns up legal fees for both the town and the project. So it locks that in, it creates certainty for the town so that they can budget. And right now, it's a little bit early for us to really say exactly what those numbers are gonna be, but by and large, for this facility, which is approximately 8 acres of space, it'll be generating taxes in the ballpark of about $150,000 a year, probably a little bit more than that. I'm trying to be very conservative on that until we actually establish what we end up with.
Mr. Clark?
I just had a quick question about the zoning. And so this, just to be clear, this project is planned to be sited in an already zoned industrial area, correct?
Correct. So the current parcel is zoned industrial. When we started the project, and still as of today, the town of Saugerties did and does not have a specific ordinance for energy storage systems. And so in order to find a permitting path, we approached the town and we applied with the town zoning officer for a designation of the project, and he designated the project underneath town definitions as a public utility. And as such, it is allowed to be zoned, or not zoned, but go through permitting application procedures for a special use permit, and that's how it's being permitted.
Yeah, and so this area, just to be clear, this is already heavy industrial.
Correct. So
Yeah.
if I describe the parcel to you, it's currently a cinder lot that prior to now, it's been a number of years since then, prior to now was used as a training facility for the local utility. So it had a number of dummy utility poles and linemen would go there and they would train for how they would repair lines and do that sort of work. All of that equipment has been removed and it's now just an open cinder lot that's there. Some of the edges of the cinder lot have started to grow in with scrub brush and scrub pines, field pines and that sort of a thing. When you're standing there on the parcel, if you look off to the east, there's a railroad track. Between the project and the railroad track, there's a little bit of a ridge there. One of the benefits of having that ridge there is it interrupts both visual from the east side, and it also helps act as a sound barrier. So Joe mentioned earlier that the sound will be 70 decibels, but once you get beyond the parcel line, it actually drops even faster because it hits that barrier. On the west side, there's actually another ridge on the west side between the project and the highway. On that ridge, there currently sits a cell phone tower. And so the project really won't be visible from the west side. Also on the west side is the existing substation. We're about 1,200 feet from the substation. And so we're tying directly into that. Due south from there, there's a number of different industrial buildings. One of the buildings is a manufacturing building that creates lifting equipment for cranes. There's another that's a quasi-retail for construction. And then further south from there, there's McDonald's, a shopping mall, etc. And so we're entirely in an industrial commercial zone. The nearest residential property is about 900 feet away from the project.
Thank you.
You mentioned several times about what will be included in your application. Can you say where you are in this process?
Sure. So we filed the application materials, the initial application materials on December 8th. And then we went before the planning board for the first review of those applications. I'm not going to remember all the specific dates, but in the first March planning board meeting, and ran through the permit application materials. Since then, each month we've appeared before the planning board. The planning board has come back with comments and questions about the materials that we've submitted, and with each one of those iterations, we've provided additional materials at the request of the planning board, filling in the application with more and more materials per their specific interest. We just filed on July 7th the last round of those submissions. I believe we're very close to the end of satisfying all of their questions for additional information. As I noted, one of the key reports that they're looking for is that plume analysis that looks like what would happen to exhaust should it be a worst case scenario. We'll be providing that report to the planning board next week. So I'm going to say we're somewhere in the 85% of the way through the process of the permitting. And the planning board needs to go through one final stage in what's referred to as the seeker process. That's the state environmental quality review process. So they need to go through their final step of that. They'll come up with their recommendations for what the conclusion of that process should be like. Then, and I might not have their intention perfectly mapped out, but my understanding is then they will present that draft opinion to the public, open up a public hearing. I expect that public hearing might happen as early as August, but more likely probably in September. After the public hearing, they'll make a final determination on the permit. And I cannot tell you how long they might or might not choose to keep the public hearing open.
Is this on here? Okay. I'm behind you. I'm right behind you. I'm glad to hear you're not going to plan to put one of these inside the building. However, there are 66 substations by Central Hudson. Why did you pick this one so close to a school, so close to the village, which has no say in what you were doing? Why was this selected over potential others?
Yeah, so it goes to what I spoke about earlier, where we analyze every substation in every state we operate. We look at the power flows in and out now and into the future, and we need a problem to solve for a battery to make sense to put there economically. Of all the locations you mentioned, we looked at every single one of them, and we chose this one for a very specific electrical reason.
Which is?
An imbalance between supply and demand that will eventually cause a reliability issue.
But we're on a grid. You mentioned we're on a grid. No matter where this is, it would be in the system.
Yes, but because electricity follows the path of least resistance, even though we might be connected to, say, New York City, putting a resource in New York City does not solve the problem here specifically. It helps solve, but it doesn't, it's not the major thing that helps fix it. And same thing here, a battery here is not going to fix a problem in New York City. So if you have a problem in Manhattan, you put a battery in Manhattan. If you have a problem here, you put a battery here.
So you put this population at risk, basically.
No, not basically.
For your gain.
No.
Not for this community's gain, because the community does not gain. I'm
Yeah.
finished.
Yep, appreciate it.
Okay, I have a couple of short questions. What is the source of the power going into the battery?
Yeah, so similar to what I just mentioned, you kind of can't tell an electron where to go, and it will be different from day one than it is over time. So if the predominant source of electricity, which is known as the marginal generator, is a natural gas plant and we're charging, we would charge from that gas. If the marginal source of generation is solar at that moment in time, we would charge from solar. So it is true that when you first deploy a battery into a specific region and you're first solving reliability type issues, you can be charging predominantly from fossil fuels. As the energy mix of a state changes over time, what you'll find is that changes rapidly. So if you look at, say, batteries in California or Texas 10 years ago, which those are the two biggest markets for battery, what you'll see is that they were helping grid reliability, but they were oftentimes charging from fossil fuels. If you fast forward to now where there's a lot of solar and wind in both states, what you'll find is that they predominantly charge from solar and wind.
How do you measure the fatigue of a battery?
It's called state of health. So when a battery is brand new, it has 100% state of health, and that corresponds to the original megawatt hour energy rating of a facility. So if it's a 400 megawatt hour usable energy system and 100% state of health, then it can discharge 400 megawatt hours. A battery is considered at the end of its useful life when it reaches 60% state of health. And batteries under a typical use case last about 25 years with our technology. So from day one, the original batteries will be at 100% state of health, and then they degrade over time to about 60% state of health over 25 years, and then they're removed from site and recycled.
And you made reference to a grid operator. What's the grid operator?
Here in New York, it's the New York Independent System Operator, or NYSO.
Can you give me the acronym for that?
NYISO, New York Independent System Operator.
And that is that a government facility? What is that?
Yeah, they're all what I would call quasi-governmental. Alright, we'll try not to be like a massive history lesson in the United States, but electricity used to be generated, transmitted, and given to the customer by your local utility. Central Hudson, Orange and Rockland, companies like that, right? At a certain point, the government did not like the monopolistic power that those utilities had, and so they allowed independent companies like us to introduce competition so that we and the utilities are competing against each other under the idea that it lowers prices and lowers utility bills. That really took off in the 1990s, and it spread about halfway across the nation, and then Enron in California abused it, and the state of regulation and deregulation across the nation basically froze at that moment in time. So here in the state of New York, you have certain governmental entities that are involved in electricity. You have private, what are called regulated utility monopolies that are still involved. Those typically are the ones that you will pay your bill to. And then the majority of generation, or the creation of electrons, or energy storage, is done by independent power producers like us. And we have to compete against each other.
One more question.
I'll just add real quickly.
What's the benefit to this community?
I'll let you ask your question again, just so that you can restate it, but just to add on to NYSO, just as a real simple explanation to people, what I usually refer to NYSO as, it's the air traffic controller for all the utilities. And so when you need additional generation coming from one place, going to a different place, there's more demand over here, there's more generation over there. They're the air traffic controllers to make sure that this goes around, and they send instructions to the different utilities on how to interact together to make sure that that system operates smoothly without a whole lot of conflict. Their other role that they play is they're the gatekeepers for new projects to come online, and before we can build a project like ours, we have to go through a very detailed set of studies to make sure basically that we're not going to melt the wires when we plug our project in and turn it on.
Okay, thank you. And what is the benefit to this community?
Sure, so the benefit to the community is we're going to create better reliability in the regional grid, so less likely that you're going to have a blackout or a brownout in the future. The increased penetration of renewable energy that helps reduce carbon emissions for the greater community, and then also direct tax and community benefit revenues to the local community.
Sure, you have something?
Yeah, you were saying that in 3 or 4 years, the sodium-ion batteries would be ready to be in use. I'd say that I would disagree with that. I would say that they're being used in China exclusively now for other electric.
That's not true at all.
And they don't blow up, and they last 5 times.
That's not true at all. Guys, listen, I live and breathe this, and sodium ion is a good technology. China is the #1 deployer of lithium-ion and sodium-ion technology. China is in
They
year...
don't use it though in their electric cars.
What?
They don't use it in their electric cars.
Sodium-ion or lithium-ion?
Lithium ion.
That's not true at all, guys. I was in Shanghai last year. There's lithium-ion based energy storage vehicles there. I've been to the headquarters of the 2 largest Chinese battery companies, BYD and CATL. They deploy lithium-ion batteries en masse for both EVs and stationary energy storage. This is not a disputed fact, sir.
I dispute it. And it is also true that they're not doing these data centers there either. They have 375 data centers total.
All right,
Thank you for your comment.
We'll move on to the next question. There's one over here. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
My turn? Okay, I have a couple of quick ones.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you said something about the battery will last about 25 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Then what happens, do you replace the batteries, or is that the end of the project?
Yeah, so the special use permit that we will achieve is the initial entitlement for the project as well as the building permit. They only cover the original configuration. So in 25 years, there's a couple things that can happen. The facility could be what's known as repowered, where you put a new facility of some kind there, or it might be decommissioned entirely. In any case, we have to come back to a planning board, planning commission to get a new entitlement at that moment in time, because the original entitlement won't cover beyond that period of time with a new technology.
Okay. Now, you're going to train our firemen,
Yes, we're required to.
and you'll pay for that.
We have to pay for it, yep, and it's done by a qualified consultant. We use one called Fire and Risk Alliance. They're very well known in the state of New York.
And will you carry extra insurance so that if something happens to our firemen, they're going to be covered by your insurance?
The way that insurance works is a little bit more complicated than that. If you have an incident, this doesn't matter if a house burns down, this building burns down, or you get into an accident, right? There is an applicability kind of study that happens and causation about who caused it, and then state laws are a big part of that as well. So we do have to have property and liability insurance for a variety of reasons. We do it because it's the right thing to do. We require it because our lenders require us to do it, just like how mortgage providers require you get home insurance on your house. But as far as like who pays, that's a little bit more complicated because it depends on what happened, how much it cost, and whose issue it was.
I just want to make sure our firemen are covered.
Yep.
By you.
Mike,
Okay. Bill Kimball with the Daily Freeman. I have 3 questions.
Yes, sir.
When you do your sound measurements, will you be using C-weighted or A-weighted?
Yeah, so you're getting right into the deep of the weeds. What I would recommend is that you read the report that has already been submitted. And if you'd like to talk about things like A-weighted or...
Excuse me. Do you know which they would be doing?
I know a lot about sound when it comes to energy storage. I'm not going to talk about what's in the pages of that report here and now because I don't know as a fact.
Okay.
So as a reporter, if you're looking for a reliable source, that source exists already, it's been submitted, and you can get the exact quotes from the qualified sound engineer that produced it there. We'd also be more than happy to bring that sound engineer when we talk about this live in front of the planning board to answer very detailed questions like that. I don't have those answers off the top of my head.
And the sound engineer will be there on Tuesday.
Yeah, on Tuesday, the sound engineer will be there.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I was under the impression that you did come here to provide information.
There's a spectrum to the level of detail. I hope that I demonstrated that there's almost no topic related to energy storage that I can't answer at a certain level.
If you don't mind, I don't.
Hey, can you not interrupt me? I'm letting you speak. I would appreciate it if you let me speak as well.
You did answer my question.
Okay, thank you.
I have 2 more.
Okay.
Okay, you spoke before about the sound being produced being so close to the substation.
Yes.
And if I understood what you were saying, you said you were indicating that one would cancel the other out.
I did not use that terminology.
All right, so what did you mean?
Both are taken into account. So in the sound study that's been produced, the background noise was measured. The additive effects of our projects are in there as well. But when it comes to how the noise is perceived by the human ear, it is different because the tone and the frequency are different. All of that is laid out in the report, and we'd be more than happy to have you ask detailed questions of our consultant about that.
That is why I asked about the A versus C weighted.
Yes, sir.
Because it did relate to the question, so I presumed that you would have known. The 3rd question I have, are you familiar with the Krantz dictum?
I'm sorry, the what?
Krantz dictum.
No.
Okay. I'm not going to take up the room's time, but it's a NASA term. up to that point, they had 16 manned missions between February 1962 and January 1967. And they were all successful. On January 27, 1967, 3 astronauts died. And upon review, Gene Kranz, the flight director in charge of the investigation, said, "We are all responsible." So I guess my third question to you is, if something were to happen up there, and you, in all of the research that was done, would you, if something happened and people were seriously impacted or killed, would you feel bad?
What kind of question is that? Of course I feel bad. I'm a human. I don't know what you want me to do with that. Of course. Can we move on?
Yes.
I have a question, not a question, but.
Yes, sir.
A point of oh, I'm sorry.
Over this side?
All right, Mr. Rabio, we're working our way towards, you folks are not gonna leave anyone out.
Yeah.
Was back before we had the first meeting on the subject.
Yes, ma'am.
And I found a website that showed how many of these storage units we already have in the United States. Does anybody have an idea? You'd be horrified, I don't have the exact count, but you'd be horrified as to how many of these storage units are along down the East Coast. When is this gonna stop?
Yeah, it's roughly about 1,000 right now, and it's growing pretty rapidly.
Where are we gonna stop? We can't
I
keep
don't have an
going.
answer to that question.
We can't keep going like this. Okay, and today, my daughter called me this morning. It was a little comical. She went outside yesterday and looked at the sky yesterday afternoon, and she smelled the air, and she said, "Oh darn, Canada's on fire again." How the, but anyhow, I'm sure at what point
All
today?
right, okay, thank you. We're gonna,
No,
I wanna,
no, 2 seconds.
or
2
ask
seconds.
your question, because I can sense in the room, we're starting to lose people's attention.
Okay, quick.
And there's a group that hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question.
Quick, the point was today, you couldn't breathe the air, it was bad, we had to stay inside. That was minuscule. The question, what was that, that nobody knows how many we've already got. All right, we'll leave it at that.
Okay, tell me.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you had mentioned zoning before, and that the siting was based on it being an industrial zone. But it's my knowledge that the town is also generating regulations in terms of BESS for different tiers. So you're not just being, it's not just being developed based on your ability to be in the zoning. There are going to be regulations that the town is currently working on. Is that your knowledge?
I understand that there's an interest in the town right now to develop additional zoning ordinance for energy storage, but that's not in place at this time. And it wasn't in place last fall when we were prepared to submit our permit application. So we submitted our permit application underneath the existing process that was available at the time.
So you're working under the...
We're working underneath the current, or you might call it grandfather process or whatever, and that's just simply a timing issue.
I understand. Thanks.
Can I add something to that question?
Yes, sir.
The energy code that was adopted late in 2025
Yes, sir.
is the foundation for the rules that you folks have to follow.
That's right.
And that's, the planning board is holding you accountable to those standards as they digest and contemplate this.
Yes, the planning board holds us accountable to that. There's also an independent state agency called NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, that under state law, they do an independent review to make sure we are complying with it, and that is done at no cost to the local community.
Okay.
So, can you clarify what you just said? What 2025 planning rules?
There's no planning rules. The New York State adopted basically the New York City Fire Code statewide late in 2025.
Thank you.
And these folks are subject to that with their current application.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Rabin, I know you have more.
Hi, Ray.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for the board for having this. We definitely want transparency, and having these discussions really help. I really appreciated the conversations with decibels, frequencies, all that, where you were making comparisons. And you had definitely stated about this being less annoying. So that's stating basically that we are to expect that it will be annoying by you saying it will be less annoying.
It will produce sound, and the
Which
tone
will
and the
be annoying.
frequency are generally perceived as less annoying than, like, say, a buzzing. Without a doubt, we are adding a new source of sound to the community, for sure.
Right, so I just wanted to bring that up. And then with your comparisons, I just needed a little more clarity, because you're saying right here it would be 70 decibels, which is loud according to your paper.
That's at the property line, at the closest part, yeah.
Right, for a car. One of my neighbors has a diesel car. I have a hybrid car. Other people have electric cars. That diesel car shakes my entire 4-bedroom house when it starts up.
Yep.
What kind of car are you talking about in this report?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't say.
So I didn't create that visual, but I would imagine it is your average internal combustion engine. What I can tell you is that sound is subjective, and I would encourage all of you to go to the closest facility that exists. I don't know where it's at, but listen to it, right? Because we can talk all day about what's loud or what's not. That changes as we age. It's perceived differently by different races at different ages. A lot of stuff can vary that, right? And so I don't know which specific car, it's not a Toyota Prius and it's definitely not a diesel engine or whatever, but I would imagine whatever sound engineer put together that graphic chose an average internal combustion engine.
Yeah, I just would love future meetings like this where we could delve deeper, so again, thank you for being here for that.
If you want to delve deeper, I really suggest that you go to the town records and you look at the sound report that we filed with the permit application and read the report all the way from the top to the bottom. In that report, they talk about, the engineers provide a detailed explanation of how sound is perceived, how sound increases if you are adding more than one sound resource together. It's not linear, it's logarithmic, and so it's not quite as simple to say, okay, at property line it's 70 dBA, therefore we're all gonna hear diesel cars. At the property line, it's 70 dBA, but as you go beyond that, it rapidly gets lower and lower and lower, and by the time you're at the nearest residence, which is about 900 feet away, it's below 50 dBA, which is a quiet room. So, you need to really kind of look at that report, and if you want to delve into the details, look at the report and learn from the report.
Yeah, and also it does talk about the background sound levels that were measured there, which were about 50 dBA as well. So it does get into the details, but I think like having, a discussion about who perceives what noise or which vehicle it's similar to probably isn't super productive. But, if you want to ask those questions of our sound engineer when he comes up, I'd be curious to see how he answers as well, but we're happy to dig on it with you.
But I think anyone who lives here, it is productive for us, but
For sure.
coming in when you don't live here.
But do you really want me to be like, it's a Toyota Prius from 1997, is that useful to you? Because if that's not how it works, right, it's gonna be a different tone, a different frequency.
It's less annoying, you're saying, so you're saying it's annoying essentially, so I'm just.
I did not say that, I said it's less annoying because annoyance is relative, right?
Ask your question.
Yeah.
Please.
All right, thank you, we're gonna move on to the next question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I get the next question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you guarantee that there will be no incident that ruins the air, soil, water, or property values of the people of Saugerties?
So there's a couple different things you asked about, but no, the answer is I can't guarantee any of those things.
Okay, and who takes liability if any of those things, including drop in property values, happen because of your project?
Sure, so once again, you've asked about a lot of stuff, right? So if there's a safety incident or something like that, this is a legal matter, right? That's how liability is determined. But just like any other industry or industrial facility, in general, whoever is deemed to have caused an incident is who is deemed liable. Now, I can't talk about these things in absolutes or else my general counsel would get really angry with me, right? This is a matter for the courts. But, we've all seen how this stuff goes down. If a person or a corporation causes something, that is often who the courts will look to, right? When it comes to something like property values, that's something where, have we commissioned a study on that yet? We can commission a study on that. There's a firm called Cohn-Resnick that we use for this. They will reference a lot of nationwide studies that have been done. They will look at local property values, and they put together a report that basically talks about what this has looked like in other communities from a property value perspective, and what that looks like. So it sounds like we haven't done one of those yet. We're happy to do it here. That being said, you probably would not like the results of it. And what it's going to say is that whatever property value damage was done was likely already done when the high voltage lines were put into the area, and that there is no marginal impact from the battery. And that's kind of what they say in all of our projects nationwide.
Okay, well, that begs my last question,
Yep.
which is, why should we believe anything any of your studies say, since you fund them and you have an
Sure.
interest in them being?
I fully
the same
encourage
way?
you to neither trust, but definitely verify everything we say. If the board or the commission would like to bring in an independent consultant to deal with any of that stuff, not paid for by us, of their choice, we are happy to deal with that.
Okay, board.
Let's,
The planning board has made recommendations that they'll be bringing in a third party to review the application.
Yeah.
I have a question over here. Thank you.
Yes.
In reference to that, has there been any independent noise studies done for the site, and how will you ensure operational noise stays below levels that affect nearby residents, especially given that the project's location is on a hill?
Yeah, so that study has been filed. As far, what's that?
An independent study not done by you.
No, so I mean, as part of a planning commission application submission, the onus is on us to submit that. It is up to the planning commission or the board, they have different names in different parts of the country, whether or not they want to bring in an independent party to verify that. Initially, staff will verify that, and then if they feel like they don't have the resources to evaluate, sometimes they'll bring in a specialist. But to the best of my knowledge, that has not occurred. It's also not our decision whether or not that happens. We do welcome it though.
Bill, hold tight, we're gonna go to another.
I just got a question for you.
No, I'm gonna hold you up just for a second.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I
Yes.
wanted to ask you about the infrastructure.
Mhm.
Is our infrastructure all ready to go for this project?
When you say infrastructure, are you talking about like the dirt, the civil engineering, the electrical lines?
Don't know anything about that.
Sure.
Can you plug this thing in now?
No.
Or do we have to upgrade our infrastructure?
So the way that the grid gets upgraded is that the cost is attributed to whoever needs to build something new or whoever needs to use something new. So for example, when there is a grid upgrade that is required for reliability for one reason or another, a study is done to look at the marginal cost that a facility like ours is introducing on the grid. In other words, what lines need to be upgraded, what transformers might need to be upsized or replaced, something like that. That cost is 100% borne by the project, and nationwide, including here in New York, there's like a very regimented electrical engineering and economic driven study that gets done. It's called an interconnection study that tells us what we have to pay for the project.
Okay, so you bear that.
We do.
cost. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Number two, when you talked about all kinds of chemical
Mhm.
testing that's done, do you test for hydrogen fluoride in the case of a thermal runaway?
Yeah, so when we produce our plume study, which is coming to next week, the two primary constituents that are discussed in there is carbon monoxide and hydrogen fluoride. Because those are the gases that are of greatest concern, particularly in the pre-combustion gases, which are produced before it catches fire. And in that study, it's going to make an opinion on something called IDLH, or what is immediately dangerous to life and health. And once again, we will do a study specific to this project, but I kind of already know what it's going to say. Because we use the same batteries at every project nationwide, and we commission these things nationwide, it's likely going to say that due to the effects of dispersion and those gases being hot and distributing in all directions and rising because they're warm, that greater than 50 feet, usually it's 50 feet or less, it is not immediately dangerous to life and health.
My understanding, not to interrupt you,
Yes, ma'am.
is that hydrogen fluoride is heavy in the air.
Not when it's hot. So it goes up, it disperses, and then it eventually falls below levels that are of concern. And then at that point, maybe it gets blown away, maybe it goes down, maybe it goes up. But when we talk about gases that are lighter or heavier than air, it's actually a density discussion, and it depends on the temperature. When those gases come out of the battery, they are really hot, so they go up. All that is taken account in the dispersion modeling, and once again, it's something that if it's of interest to be independently verified, we are more than happy to have a third party verify that. I will say, I think that's part of the NYSERDA review.
It is.
Yeah, so when NYSERDA, the state comes in and does a review with their independent consultant, which we don't, well, Actually, we're required to pay for it, but we give
required.
NYSERDA a check and then NYSERDA pays them. We can't direct their work. So that is independently verified. Now, in real world instance, there's something called a 4-gas monitor. Chief, if I recall, you guys on one, right? And a 4-gas monitor does measure for these types of things. And so it's prudent emergency first response for these types of incidents or any other fire to observe what direction the smoke is going, set up a gas monitor downstream and see what's going on. And in none of the incidents worldwide where this has happened have they discovered that it was immediately dangerous to life and health or really above any kind of threshold, because there's a couple different ways you can measure it that is concerning. Yep.
Because it is a concern if it gets mixed with water, it becomes hydrochloric acid, and that's a huge problem.
Right. That is not a concern on these projects for a variety of chemical reasons. If you want, I can dig into it. The main one is we don't apply water when they catch fire.
Well, your water around the other batteries, in order to contain it for the other batteries, so that the fire doesn't spread. There'll be water.
Oh, you're talking about like if you apply cooling water?
Well, it's not by itself, the battery. It's a huge, you've got a lot of batteries there. This one's on fire. You want to make sure these others don't.
So the means and methods by which you fight fire are really universally agreed upon. So the International Association of Fire Chiefs, the National Fire Protection Association, and the codes and standards that govern this, they tell you exactly what to and what to not do when it comes to these fires. The chief understands that, we understand that, and I certainly everybody else understands that. It is very limited situations where you might apply water to an adjacent unit. So for example, if you have a battery that has caught fire and you have like just an absolutely horizontal wind and you see that flames impinging on a unit that's 10 feet away because that's the spacing between them, maybe out of an abundance of caution, the chief will set up what's either called a fire monitor, which is like a nozzle on a tripod, or him or his mutual aid organization might bring out a ladder pipe, which is a ladder truck that has a nozzle on the end. You will run it somewhere between 150 and 250 gallons per minute in what's known as a fog pattern. So not a straight stream, but a fog pattern, and you might lightly cool the unit next to it. That scrubbing effect, which is what you're getting at, is not nearly enough to bring an appreciable amount of hydrogen fluoride out of the air and create hydrofluoric acid. When they have measured runoff from when we used to put waters on these fires back in the day, I'm not aware of a single one of those reports showing an appreciable amount of hydrofluoric acid. They did occasionally show other things that are bad because the previous chemistries that were used had heavy metals. The ones we use now don't have heavy metals. But to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of hydrofluoric acid ever being a concern.
I'm concerned.
I will say that one day, like this consultant talked about Fire Risk Analysis, Fire and Risk Alliance, they will be here. They measure fire water from these fires, both in their lab, and they're aware of the reports from real world incidents. If you really want to get into the weeds on that, they'd be happy to do that with you.
That would be good, because Suffolk County ended up with a lawsuit over contaminated water, runoff water.
I can't talk about that specific incident, but if you do want to talk about PFAS, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, just one more. You said the battery life is between 20 and 25 years.
Yes.
As they get older, they run hotter.
Yes.
Require more cooling.
Yes.
More cooling, more noise. Okay, that's one thing.
Can we pause on that real quick?
I'm sorry, sure.
The cooling equipment is designed for what's known as the end-of-life condition. So we know that batteries operate hotter, and they are sized for that to provide adequate cooling capacity. When we do noise studies, it's modeled at that cooling equipment running at 100%. And so the decibel levels that you see in there and the tonal qualities and all that stuff we've been talking about tonight, that does take into account the batteries when they're at their oldest point and therefore the loudest.
Okay, and when they're at their oldest point, are you guys going to be around to dispose of this stuff?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that can be handled. And Paul, help me out if there's already something agreed to or if it's part of New York state law. We routinely agree to decommissioning bonds. And so what that says is, we, this capitalist corporation that will always do what's in the best interest of our shareholders, which is generally the cheapest thing, oftentimes those incentives don't cause us to do the right thing, right? And so companies go out of business, sometimes they get bought and sold, and in any case, it's more likely than not that if, we decommission this in 25 years, that you're not gonna see my face and I'm not gonna work here again, so whatever I tell you tonight probably won't come true, right? There's a means and a method to solve that, and it's called a decommissioning bond. And so we hire a surety company. A surety company is very similar to an insurance company They all have perfect credit. They've all been around for a gazillion years since, America was, first founded, and just like any insurance company. And the idea is that we agree to a condition of approval as part of our application that says, hey, Key Capture Energy, if you or any other company that buys this project one day goes out of business, sells it, chooses not to do the right thing, well, then the municipality can call that surety company and say, hey, Key Capture Energy went out of business, or they didn't do the right thing, or they sold it to somebody that didn't do the right thing. Come clean this stuff up. And the surety company takes care of it. That is something we agree to routinely because we understand that Paul and I probably won't be here in 25 years, and that corporations in generally might not always do the right thing if it's expensive. And so that's how we solve around that. As far as like project specifics, Paul, if there's anything to add, go for it.
The only thing to add to that is that surety bond that we post. So we go through a very detailed study, third-party engineered study that comes up with the cost estimates for decommissioning, looks at all the current market forces, but then we have to update that every 3 years. We have to refresh it so that over the 25-year life of the project, we're always updating that surety. So it's, if scrap values, recycle values go up or down, we're accounting for that, and that's included in what we post for a bond. So that bond is always up to date and the appropriate level that is needed to take apart the project in total.
Yeah, and in the spirit of not trusting us, but definitely verifying, in almost every community we work in, an independent assessor is brought in to be like, hey, Key Capture Energy says this is the appropriate size of the bond, what do you think? And so that will be vetted as well, almost always.
So I'll just add to that, that's a familiar thing for us and for municipalities across the state. Very often with infrastructure projects, certainly with solar, we required those types of bonding arrangements to make sure that if those facilities, when they ended the reuseful life, if a responsible party wasn't still there, the resources were available to the government to remove or replace those facilities. Right, Bill had someone in the back before he started.
Yeah, I just had a question.
Sorry.
You said that this is to like augment the regional grid. Like, how big is that region that you're talking about?
So that goes to kind of physically, we have 3 grids in the United States, right? So we're a part.
Like the entire eastern grid.
We are a part of the Eastern Interconnection, which, despite the name, starts in Kansas and kind of goes north and south all the way down to Texas and goes all the way over, right?
Right.
So that's all electrically interconnected, but that's too big of a, chunk for any one body to govern. And so, I don't know, Paul, there's like 100 utilities and 4 or 5 regional, what are called independent system operators within the Eastern Interconnection, all which govern their little body. And in the state of New York, you have the New York Independent System Operator. Over in New England, you have the New England Independent System Operator. Just south of here, you have what's known as PJM, which was formerly for like Pennsylvania, Jersey, and was it Rhode Island? But Maryland, and now covers much of the Eastern Interconnect. And each one of those is responsible for the flow of electrons, and then they all trade electrons with each other as well. And even Canada is involved in that as well.
I guess then my question would be like, does it have to be right here to benefit this particular part of the power grid?
Kind of, right? Because electricity follows the path of least resistance, if you have a problem in an area, you generally have to put a resource there, right?
How big of an area are you talking about? Do you mean specifically Saugerties, or do you mean like Hudson County?
It's more complex than that, unfortunately. And it's not about physical distance, it's about electrical distance, right? So thicker wires and higher voltage wires tend to transport electricity over greater distances. Lower voltage wires, including the 120 volts that eventually ends up in your house, they are meant to go shorter distances. And if you were to go up to that substation and look at where all the wires go and the various sizes of them, and then you went to the first substation that substation's connected to, and you look at where those go, you're gonna see a spider web of wires that goes everywhere, right? And that's why talking about the local electrical benefit is such a nebulous topic. I can't tell you that Saugerties is 100% going to have less blackouts because of this specific facility. But what we do know is the collective action of a bunch of these resources in an area can help solve a problem, and that's why Saugerties doesn't have its own grid, right? It's connected elsewhere. But everybody on the grid kind of has to do their part.
Right.
You can't just put power plants in Florida to deal with New York and vice
Bigger
versa.
question is just like, couldn't it be somewhere else with a comparable benefit to us?
Unfortunately not.
Not my backyard.
What's that?
Not my backyard.
No, I'm sorry guys, that's just not how it works. It's not about costing more, right? We put it elsewhere, and then the way that electricity is traded, what's called on a nodal basis within the New York Independent System Operator, the facility is just not gonna operate, because NISO will say, well, hey, this battery that's 10 miles away, it doesn't make sense to dispatch it to solve this problem in Saugerties. What they might do is take our battery and 5 other batteries that are all 10 miles away, plus a gas plant, and maybe say, oh, well, to solve this problem, we gotta do that. But that's just not kind of how it works. And so guys, we didn't put this here specifically because we were trying to hurt Saugerties, right? And like cost is a part of it, but it's actually more about economic benefit on the revenue side. Revenue is a proxy for solving the electrical problem. If I put it 10 miles away, it's not, which by the way, we have some 10 miles away, it's a bad example, but like, if I put one like really far away, it's just not gonna produce revenue, which means it's not solving the electrical problem.
Wait, so are you saying that these have to be like in every single town then?
It depends on the size and it depends on the shape of the grid. But in general, every substation in the United States, if something changes, it could be growth of the population, it could be old power plants being retired, it could be old power lines going bad. As something changes, new infrastructure is required. And so if you think about the concept I talked about earlier, where there's an imbalance between supply and demand, your options are to put more transmission lines, which those aren't popular, to put a gas, a coal, or a nuclear plant. You may generally like those concepts or you might not, but you're probably not gonna want it in your backyard. You could do it with solar, but it takes up a lot of land and it only solves a part of the problem because it only works when the sun is shining, or you can do it with wind. One of the reasons why I was personally drawn to the energy storage industry, even though I've worked with all these other technologies my entire career, is when you're looking to solve an electrical problem, we are less bright, less loud, less obtrusive, take up less land and less expensive than the alternatives.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, it sounds like what you're trying to say is that like, we won't have brownouts, but like Kingston will, because it's 10 miles away.
It depends. So that's called attribution science, and that's where it's really difficult because the grid is one big machine that operates in a socialist fashion. So you can't necessarily say that the loss of any one facility or the addition of any one facility is going to specifically prevent or cause a specific event. We do know, and this is settled science, that the collective action of all of them does help benefit.
Right.
But guys, like I said, I would never come here and say Saugerties is gonna have less blackouts, specifically because of this facility. We wouldn't be able to say that, but what we do know is it can contribute to that.
Right, yeah, but that contribution could be anywhere.
No.
Is that a question?
so-
Are we asking questions?
Just a real quick point, if I can just make a real quick point.
Fine.
So,
Can you stop that?
This is not the only facility that we have
So let's
proposed
come up here and start.
in Hudson Valley. We have other projects that are proposed in Hudson Valley, and as Joel noted, it doesn't take one facility to solve the problem. It's gonna take multiple facilities that are gonna be distributed across the state. There are more than one problem, and what we need to do is we need to provide resilience for the entire system, not just one area, so there needs to be more than one. And I think one of the things that everybody in this room can agree on is that you really appreciate the benefit of being able to go home from this meeting tonight and turn on your lights and know that they are going to turn on. And that is part of this movement of distributing energy storage across the state. It is absolutely necessary in order for you to maintain your reliability and have the option to do that. And I can also tell you that of all the years that I've developed wind, solar, and battery projects, I have not attended one community meeting where somebody hasn't stood up and said, I'm not opposed to renewable energy, I'm just opposed to this project. And if every community says that, then there are no projects, and we don't move forward.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Assuming you're in and you're successful and you're profitable, will you want to acquire more property to expand?
Yeah, we don't have plans to expand here, and that once again goes to the problem we're solving. The megawatt rating of this facility was specifically chosen because that is the size of the problem. So if I were to put, say, like 1,000 megawatt battery on that land, Well, that's too much horsepower to solve the problem, and I'm just wasting capital expenditure money because it's overkill. So the project was sized specifically for the problem that was there. From time to time, people do come in and they, request to expand their facilities. We don't have plans to do so right now, but I'm not saying that somebody at Key Capture Energy 20 years from now won't ask for that. But that's the important part they have to ask. Our original entitlement with the Planning Commission and Planning Board, that only covers this specific facility on this specific land. If we want to come back for an expansion, we have to ask.
One other question.
Yep.
So I understand from what you said that you're going to make a payment in lieu of taxes yearly for the duration of the project, which would be
the duration of the agreement, and the duration of the agreement would be negotiated. And there are.
Oh, it hasn't been negotiated.
It hasn't been negotiated, so that would be a communication between the town, the county, the IDA, the Industrial Development Authority, schools involved in that discussion as well.
Could that conceivably be 20 years?
I don't recall the very specifics, but it would be underneath what the county refers to as a deviated pilot agreement. And there are limitations on how long you can make that, and so it would be underneath the statute of how long that's allowed to be made.
How long is that allowed to be made?
I can't recall right now if that's a 15 or 20 year allowance for that agreement. I don't know if anybody on the board knows that.
I don't want to guess. I think 20 is the longest they go.
That's what I thought too, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. I work in a number of different jurisdictions in different states, and every state has its own tax policy, so I don't want to speak off the top of my head.
You mentioned that you would take care of the cost of training our
Yes.
fire department. Would you also pay for additional equipment that might be needed?
Sure. So when additional equipment is needed, which is pretty rare, we have bought it in the past. That being said, only normal turnout gear is required to respond to these fires. We understand the equipment and the implements that the chief has, and we haven't identified any gaps. But for example, you heard us talk earlier about like a 4-gas monitor. To the extent the chief didn't have one, which he does, we would buy one. We've worked in really rural communities. I'm thinking of one of our projects that is located in Idaho, where they had an annual budget of $30,000 per year, and it's just a couple of farmers nearby that had it, that responded to fires. They didn't have proper self-contained breathing apparatus, the way that allows them to breathe. They didn't have proper fire suits, and we helped them out with that. When we go into a community like this, that's generally not an issue, and I'll let the chief speak for his own stuff, but we do an assessment of this before we come in. We didn't see any issues when you take both the chief's equipment and the equipment and personnel available to him and his mutual aid organizations into account, but I don't want to speak on behalf of the chief.
I'm a little confused when you talk about decibel, and I hope you can explain this.
When we talk about what, I'm sorry?
When you talk about decibel level of noise,
Yes.
and is that when you say it's 70 or whatever, is that 7 decibel, is that in aggregate for the entire area, or is that per container? Because to use your analogy, when you're standing underneath a fan outside of Walgreens, if there were 15 fans, it would be a lot louder. So how does that
So
work?
this gets into some of the A-weighted versus C-weighted questions that the reporter over here was asking about. To answer your question directly, it is additive, but it's complicated, right? So if you have, we'll use speakers, because speakers are an example that everybody understands. If you put 2 identical speakers next to each other and they're playing the same noise, even though there's twice the speakers, it's actually plus 3 dB in sound power level. So it's not actually necessarily double as loud, and that's because the decibel scale is logarithmic. So that hopefully demonstrates how the additive effect of multiple sources of noise that are identical isn't going to be linear. When we model these, we do take that into account, the additive effects. So every single container, we know the direction the noise was produced, we know what's in the noise from a tone and frequency perspective, and we know how loud it is at the end of its life at full blast. All that gets put into a computer program to that ISO study I referenced earlier, and that's how they come up with these lines that say, within this line it's 50 dB, and within this line it's 60 dB, and things like that. That is all in the report that's been filed, and when we bring our sound consultant out here, an acoustic engineer, I fully encourage you to grill him and kind of ask him those detailed in the weeds questions. We definitely take the additive effects into account though.
In the world of noise engineering, 50 plus 10 equals 53. So it's not exactly
not even that, yeah.
But again, I invite you to go to the town record and read the sound report, because it actually provides a very user-friendly explanation of how all of that works.
and I look forward to him, the city
Yeah.
engineer, coming.
And to that example, it's actually 50 plus 50 equals 53. That's how logarithmic the scale is, right? So, yep.
And one last question. In the, you know, it's very reassuring that the
Yeah.
safety concerns have been addressed to a great extent and that the incidents have reduced. But let's suppose there were an incident.
Mm-hmm.
What area would need to be evacuated?
Sure.
Generally, can you say it's 5 miles, 10 miles, and what are the evacuation plans? Have you talked about that? Have you done an impact study together to figure out how, especially because this is right near the access to the throughway?
Yep.
So if we had to get, 5-mile radius of people out of town, how would we even do that?
Sure. So what I can say is it's definitely not 5 to 10 miles. If you've read about multiple mile evacuations, perhaps like that Moss Landing incident in California, we can get into at one point how that happened. It goes back to like lack of training, abundance of caution, not knowing what was there because it was an older system and there was a training deficit. Once again, I don't want to speak for the chief, but one day when he is here in his capacity as a fire chief at a planning board and not as a board member, I encourage you to ask him these questions because his department knows. That being said, you basically have staging radiuses, so like how safe can he be away? That's like 150 to 330 feet, depending on which source of information. I think here in the state of New York, they arrived at 150 feet. The Trump administration, in that same document I referenced earlier, they did 330 feet. It's up to him to determine what that safe staging distance is. When it comes to an evacuation radius, that is where things get really deep in the weeds because there's multiple standards for that. So some people follow the IDLH, that what is immediately dangerous to life and health kind of radius. That's something that will show up in the plume study, and that's where it's like as little as 50 feet. Because the heat and the dispersion effect that, affects all smoke, but our smoke is no different, like that's meaningful, right? That's why if you put your face over a campfire, you're inhaling toxic gas, but if you're sitting 3 feet next to it, you're probably okay, right? So if you follow the immediately dangerous to life and health standard, you're probably looking at somewhere around 50 feet. But you would never do that because you're gonna at least put yourself, evacuate as far away as like where the firefighters wanna stay, which is typically around 150 feet. There's also what's known as the Environmental Protection Agency AEGL1 and AEGL2 standards. It generally gets modeled by like emergency management departments. Chief, I don't know if that's done at the county level or at the local level here, but they will do those types of studies. We can also do them for if you'd like. And once again, it says what gases are there, what direction are prevailing winds, how hot are the gases, things like that, and it can develop a radius from there. Generally speaking, when we conduct those types of studies or when third parties do them on our projects, you're looking at 300 to 500 feet. That's one of the many reasons why, despite the code saying we could put these much closer to residences, we try to do a few hundred feet because whether it's light, noise, sound, smoke, gases, we find that that's the type of radius where we're not going to impact everybody's daily life. That being said, I don't get to choose that. That is the incident commander's choice, and the chief might have opinions that are different than mine. We work with fire chiefs all over the nation, and they're the boss. So, when we put together an emergency response plan for this project, which we're required by law to do, that's in that New York State Fire Code, we're going to put a suggestion in there, and the chief can totally say, no, I want something different. I don't know if you want to speak to that or no, but
He hit the nail on the head. He hit the nail on the head with the criteria that we'll follow. We don't draft anything typically locally. OFPC, which is a state agency, does that, and most of our standards and procedures we take from the state level and those guidelines.
So I'm kind of understanding that if there were an event, the village would not have to be evacuated.
At this juncture, with what we understand, what we know, what we've worked with Fire Risk Alliance, and there's another
ESRG. You're talking about the state's group, yeah, Energy Safety Response Group.
Which we have consulted with both. No, there's no reason for the village to be, there's no reason for traffic to be stopped on the thruway.
And how long, again, hopefully some of this doesn't happen and it's
Yeah.
wonderful that the incident rate has gone down, but still, it's not zero risk.
Yep.
So if there were to be an event, how long do these fires last? And does that impact the evacuation?
Great question. This is another big one that has changed over time. So when you look at the incidents that are happening now, like I mentioned, the vast majority of them are projects that were deployed before 2020, right? And we, as I mentioned in my presentation, we've learned a lot since then. And two really important things get to the heart of your question. So in the olden days, we used to put a bunch of batteries together in one place. Maybe it was inside of a building, maybe it was in like a super large container, but in any case, what you're doing is you're putting more sources of energy and more sources of fuel in one place. When that happens, the fire is going to be bigger, your deflagration, which is a fancy word for a subsonic explosion, that risk goes up, everything gets worse, right? What we learned over time is that putting them in buildings and packing them in like sardines is pretty dumb. And so that's where that 20-foot shipping container form factor I talked about came from. And that's where we came up with the distances between those shipping containers. So by limiting ourselves to smaller containers, you're limiting the amount of energy in one place at one time that can have a thermal runaway event and maybe catch fire. By spacing them out, and that spacing is dictated by code, I don't get to choose that, we know that in any one of those 100 incidents I mentioned worldwide that have happened, not once has a flame ever jumped across the 10-foot aisle that you'll see in between those groups of shipping containers. That's based off of fire science done by a bunch of PhD fire protection engineers, and it's been validated in the real world that actually deal with this stuff on a day-to-day basis, not on a computer, like the chief and all of his colleagues in the fire service. So, there's another thing that we know. We used to put water on this, because, you know, when you have a fire, you put water on it, right? For a variety of reasons, that's a bad idea. One, electricity and water have never mixed. You know, if the chief shows up to a substation that's on fire, you don't put water on it because that's a bad idea. You might do nothing, you might put a special film called Purple K on it. When you show up to a battery and you put water on it, one, you might make the incident worse because whatever batteries haven't shorted out yet, you're now probably going to short them out. And two, you are prolonging the incident and perhaps making it worse. The reason for that is thermal runaway is a chemical reaction. And almost all chemical reactions happen faster the hotter that they occur and slower the cooler that they occur. If you have a bunch of batteries on fire and you put water on them, because that thermal runaway reaction does not require oxygen to occur like a normal fire, you're actually cooling it down. And an incident that would normally be over in 3 to 24 hours can now last multiple days. So if you read about something in Chandler, Arizona that caught fire and burned for, I don't remember what it was, like 7 to 9 days, right? Or you read about a building in California that was burning for 2 weeks, they put a lot of batteries in one place at one time inside a big building. Those buildings had automatic sprinkler systems, which you definitely shouldn't do anymore. You should put them in a building, and the sprinklers are, you know, exacerbate the issue. And you spread them out. So I know that that was a long-winded answer, but that is a really core difference about why, if we have an incident, it's smaller and it gets over quicker, and usually in 3 to 24 hours.
3 to 24 hours. And what happens if it rains?
Sure, good question. So the true answer is like we've actually looked at this. If you look at like a 99th percentile rain event and the number of inches per hour, and you model that over the surface area of a 20-foot shipping container, I don't know that any of that water actually like hits the fire if it's in thermal runaway. It probably evaporates before it hits it, right? So whether you're asking from like a prolonging the duration of the incident perspective or you're worried about water contamination, from what we've seen, you know, compared to like the amount of volume coming out of the fire hose, like I mentioned the 250 gallons per minute before, even if you have like a 99th percentile rain event, it's just, you know, for lack of a better term, not statistically significant in terms of like water risks relative to other water risks out there. Thank you for the questions, good ones.
Before I let you go, Bill has one in the back. And Bill, after this we'll move forward because it's getting late. We're starting to
Ted, we'll end with Ted. Ted's got a question.
Just quick.
2.5 years.
Yes.
Just confirming that you said the construction and installation would take a year to a year and a half?
Yeah.
So that includes the noisy trucks, the cutting down of acres and acres of trees, the installing the heavy battery storage containers?
So as I noted before, by and large, the site is was cleared. It was a former site, gravel. The trees that are around the edges, most of the areas where we need to clear are smaller trees that are kind of scrubby pine. Bill had a chance to go up and tour the facility with us, and he can kind of verify that that's kind of what exists there. And the total amount of tree area that we'll be clearing is less than 3 acres, and that includes, we have 2 alternate paths for getting our power line over to the substation. One of those paths does go through the woods, and one of those paths goes down an existing driveway owned by the utility. If the utility allows us to put that line on the driveway, then that's even fewer trees. And so over the 8-acre footprint of the facility, we'd be cutting less than 3 acres of trees. And again, those trees are all kind of low value trees that have been growing up through a cinder lot, approximately 10 to 12 years old. So I'm sorry, I focused on trees, so I minimized it, so it's not, so the clearing of the trees, that's gonna take, at most a couple of weeks. There'll be earthwork for approximately a month, 2 months. Then we're pouring foundations, and then a whole lot of the assembly that happens. All of the units come in, as Joe pointed out, it's remanufactured. They come in, they get lifted, and so those deliveries are pretty quick. And so it happens pretty rapidly. And then the assembly that happens, that takes over a fair amount of period of time, is it does take the technicians a fair amount of time to run all the electricity, all the wiring, all the conduit, make sure that everything is connected correctly, and most of that is quiet activity.
Yeah, I mean, it's much worse than the beginning. When you're moving dirt and leveling the site, that's where you hear the beeping and the machines backing up, and that's where you're hearing the heavy diesel engines. And then as Paul mentioned, when we're actually installing the batteries, that's actually a crane that's not that loud, and there's, only 1 or 2 operating at a time. They're putting in stuff that was built off-site, and then during the commissioning period, it's actually really quiet. So the amount of time that it is louder, I don't know. Depends, it's like 4 to 5 months is where it's like, I would say, annoying from a construction noise perspective, and then it ramps up from there.
A lot of months for people to live nearby.
All right, we're gonna continue this for a little longer, but at 9 o'clock, we want to break from it.
Sure.
Okay?
What
So
question?
we're gonna do, there's some folks here who had their hand up all night, I'm gonna try to
Sorry.
break down.
First of all, I want to say I appreciate you guys coming in
course.
because it would have actually been greater if you guys had come in earlier in the process.
We
Because
did.
I think it would have been
Let's do a question.
really super helpful.
We did.
I'm hoping that you're gonna come back again before any final decisions.
We will.
Can I come back to the sound issue?
Sure.
Are you guys aware of the unique properties of how the sound travels in this community? Because there is an echo chamber that comes down from the throughway that comes all the way into the village. So while in other communities, they may not experience this kind of noise, we are going to be hearing a lot more than typically another community might because of the geography, okay? So I'm wondering, is there a sound study that's gonna happen at receptors from within the village so the village residents have an understanding of what the impact is going to be?
So in the sound study that we did do, there are receptors that are on, is it North Road, the next road that is east from the property. So we did put receptors there, and those receptors show that the ambient noise that is in that area is actually a little bit less than what's up at the lot itself. And so, that's a really good indication because the sound that you're talking about has to go through that area. And based on the accumulated effect of noise and everything else, sound getting into that area would be, caused by our project, would be well below 50 decibels. And so there's really no conceivable way that the sound coming from our project is actually going to reach any part of the village confines.
I find that really hard because I live on the next street over and I can hear every truck that comes down the thruway pretty much because of the unique properties of the sound. Especially there's a funnel that comes down the main road on Ulster Avenue. So I think additional sound studies from additional receptors from within the village are needed so that people can really understand and so that you can understand what additional mitigation factors need to be put in place. Because I noticed you did add sound barriers which weren't part of your original plan, so obviously you're responding to these findings, so I would ask that you continue to do so. So that is one thing. You talked briefly about the site-specific emergency response plan. When is that going to become available?
Sure. So
That was just submitted on July 7th.
deal with the initial one, yeah. So we'll submit like a draft initial emergency response plan up front, but it's a living document. There's a couple inflection points on it. So for example, I would fully encourage the planning commission as a condition of approval to say that before we can get our building permit, which is different than the initial entitlements, before we get that building permit, we have to have our final emergency response plan reflecting the final configuration of the facility, like very specific design details. And the fire chief and NYSERDA have to be okay with it. I think NYSERDA requires that anyway, but if you guys want to be doubly sure, you can make that a condition of approval. So that's really where the rubber meets the road, is a condition of approval for the building permit to be issued. You know, for us to even start construction, it's got to be perfect, but it gets updated over the life of the facility.
So, but shouldn't that come before a secret determination so that the planning board can have full visibility into the impact of this project on our community before that decision is made?
I mean, tell me if I'm misspeaking, Paul, but they're just different approvals. Seeker is not the state agency that is responsible for reviewing this. That's where NYSERDA comes in, separate agency, separate set of rules, and they do review it.
Understood, but the information in that would be helpful for secret determinations because it would contain specific, site-specific implications.
Again, that the draft study has been submitted. We'll be following that. You know, it's, the information that's in there is 90% complete. It does need review and feedback from the fire department, but the actual processes, the protocols that are outlined in that report demonstrate exactly what will happen, and is a representation for the seeker review, very good representation for the impact on the community. And that in itself will not change or improve with further iterations. The information that is in there right now is more than adequate for that level of determination.
And then I have another question. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but
I'm Joel.
you're using the word entitlement.
Sure.
So is this an entitlement that you're going to be selling on to a different company, or is your plan to continue being the company operating this facility in perpetuity?
That's actually something that's really unique about Key Capture Energy. So we develop, build, and own and operate for the long term. That, I don't know, somewhat unique. There's a lot of companies that are effectively flippers. They get their entitlement, then they sell it to somebody else. That's not what we do.
That's good. That's good.
And if I can just add, entitlement is maybe used in this context slightly different. Basically, what we're using the word entitlement for is the permit approval.
Yeah.
The permit approval is the entitlement. We're not referring to some other financial mechanism or anything like that. The entitlement.
You're not going to sell that permit approval onto a different company?
No, that permit approval is for this project, and we are owners and operators of our projects, and we continue to do so. And our current plan is to do that. I mean, we can't guarantee because we can't see 25 years out into the future. But right now, the company objectives is to develop, own, and continue to operate our projects into the foreseeable future as long as we're operating.
At any point, are you going to be connected to the solar, the industrial scale solar farm that's being installed on the adjacent property? Because the same lot was in your original letter.
Yeah, so no, those are our project and that project are entirely separate. They're on different areas of land to start with. Their project connects to the 13 kilovolt power lines that are coming up beside the substation there. It's not actually connecting into the substation. Our project is connecting into the transmission level, not distribution level, so they're on the smaller distribution level, the power that's going directly to homes and businesses. Our project is going to be wired into the transmission level. That's where large amounts of electricity is flowing back and forth throughout the region and bringing in electricity from outside the region. So entirely different systems, different points of interconnection. There's no way those two projects are ever tied
Thank you
together.
for clarifying that. Is there going to need to be a substation upgrade and transmission line upgrades?
Yeah.
And who pay? And you said
We pay
that
for
you
that.
paid for that, and that's about $6 million. What's the impact on the environment of those required upgrades which are needed in order to be able to support your installation?
You're replacing equipment that's already there generally with more equipment. Now, I don't know the level that we can share. And this isn't like a I don't want to tell you kind of thing. It falls under the national security critical infrastructure stuff. I have a list of what will be required, and there's an iterative process for that. But generally speaking, what it will say is like, hey, we have a transformer of this size at this substation 3 miles away. You need to pay to replace that with a bigger one. I can't tell you what the marginal carbon footprint of that is, but that's how it works.
And I'll also add, that's not really our activity or our responsibility. So when you want to build any form of a generation plant, you file for your interconnection rights, you go through the studies. For your interconnection request, you go through the studies. And then the New York Independent System Operator conducts the studies, they come up with their results. And in the results, they then go to the utility and they say to the utility, if this project were to connect there, you need to update these transformers, and then that becomes the utility's responsibility. And so we build our project, we build all the components that are related to our project, we run the line to the substation, and then we pay the utility to make all of the other upgrades that are required to this system, to their system.
But
They
you
do the work,
know-
they
but
own
you
it.
do know that there do need to be upgrades to support this project.
Yes.
You're aware of
Yes.
that, right? Just so everybody
Yes.
else is aware of that too.
I have a.
Question, ma'am. Let somebody else ask.
Are you the moderator? I don't think so.
Hey, we did really well so far. We're gonna only carry this on for a few more minutes. I know some folks do that.
I would love to ask my
Yeah,
question.
so we're gonna go to them and.
Yeah, mine is about the perpetuity. We talked about 25 years. My family's still gonna be here in 25
Yep.
years. When you were talking about the 2020 facilities that were having all these fires, I mean, it seems like the technology is constantly updating. Like, are those facilities getting updates? Are they changing things that they know are broken with safety? And is that gonna happen for us if in 5 years there are better options, better, technology? I'm raising a kid 1 mile from this thing and wanna make sure, the environmental impact is always.
So we don't own any of those facilities that have had issues, and because I don't work for that company, I can't tell you specifically what's there. I can tell you in general what happens is that a really prudent owner of a facility, when they discover that something needs to be fixed, they'll typically update the studies and the emergency response plan related to the new hazard that is understood to exist. And whether or not they replace or upgrade the facility itself, I think it probably just depends. In general, the code operates on code cycles, and that's true for buildings like this, right? So I am nearly positive that everything electrical in this building, you can't do anymore, right? Does that mean that the municipality should come and rip out everything electrically here and upgrade it? Probably not, because that's not feasible. But if something is like critically dangerous, well then maybe there can be retroactive action. And so I think it's a little bit more nuanced, where it's not really a black or white thing, it kind of just depends.
You're talking about batteries, 25 years is a short amount of time. But like within that, there's probably going to be many generations of batteries that come through that are going to be more efficient, better for the environment. Would those upgrades happen, or would they just run the life out of the ones we've got?
Yeah, probably not. So the way that the power grid works, which is the way that a lot of, I would say, infrastructure works, is that we get a source of revenue relative to the economics and the expenses that exist today, and that's how you incentivize people to build things, right? So even if you have like a public-private partnership on a highway, it basically says, hey developer, we'll pay you X amount of dollars to build this highway, and it's based off of the best, asphalt or concrete today, and there's a source of revenue that's associated with that. The power grid works very similarly, where even if something that's a little bit more efficient comes along in 5 years, the way that my revenue structure works is still relative to the original technology, and that's to provide a really long investment horizon to incentivize that technology to be built. If I could deploy a couple $100 million into a project and then 2 years from now, if something better comes along that causes me to go out of business, that's really bad for ratepayers because they're the ones that ultimately pay for it, and it's really bad for me because I'm going to lose a ton of money, right? If I know that that's a possibility, I'm never going to make the investment to begin with. So that's why for what are called common services, things like telephone lines, any kind of utility, right down to taxi services, a certain amount of economics is guaranteed to incentivize that stuff to exist. So I know that was a little bit more complicated to answer your question, but no, in general, if a better mousetrap comes along, we're not going to replace this existing mousetrap simply for economic reasons. It just wouldn't make sense to rip it all out and put something new in.
Can I add a quick comment?
Yeah.
So we're faced with the same dilemma that you're faced with if you choose to go buy a new personal computer. And so if you need one tomorrow, you need to go buy a computer. But if you waited a year and a half, you could buy a better computer.
I'm not worried about my computer, like,
Yeah.
having a safety issue though. I mean, I thought
Well,
my computer might
But you
slow.
might want to worry about your computer having a safety issue because when you think about the relative threat of battery-powered facilities that we all use, the facility that we're proposing actually has a whole lot higher standards and safer mechanisms in place than many of the battery systems that you have in your home.
I was more asking about the safety, not about the upgrades,
Sure.
you know, and a better battery.
Yeah, so if the question is related mostly to safety and not economics, I think my original answer is there, right? If you find something that's critically dangerous, there might be a retroactive application, but oftentimes, save for that, if there's just something that's marginally better, it's probably not gonna get upgraded, and I think the wiring in this building is a decent proxy example of that. Yes, sir?
I think it might be worthwhile touching on the BMS that is always monitoring all of those critical.
Yeah, so there's layers, so the chief asked about the battery management system. It's one of many layers of safety that go into these systems, right? So there's a lot of physical safety stuff that exists. There's things to keep the batteries from catching on fire. There's things to prevent them from spreading that fire if they do catch fire. And then there's a bunch of software and sensors and controls to detect if there's gases or if stuff's starting to get hot, or if the voltage is regular, or if the current is regular, and it shuts the system down. And then there's sensors that detect if there's gas, there's sensors that detect if there's smoke, there's sensors that they detect if there's heat, and sometimes they turn on a fan that blows out the explosive gases before they can reach an explosive concentration. Or they, call the central station, which dispatches the fire chief. So we'll get into that really deep detail, but I think what the chief is kind of alluding to is the battery management system, which is the computer, the central nervous system, you will, that's like taking in all the information from these sensors. That's what knows that there's going to be an incident and tries to shut it down before there is. It's not 100% foolproof like anything in the electric industry is. I can never say there's a 100% chance that something will or will not happen, but it is a major part of what makes these modern systems really safe.
I think this is gonna be the last question.
Okay, yeah, so I was wondering if there are examples operating now close by of this system. Are there?
Yeah, we can look where the closest one is at.
Well, so we're actually coordinating with the town right now, and the closest system that we own and we have permission to tour or whatever, is actually across the state in Blasdale up near Buffalo.
Yeah.
But on 2 weeks from now, we are working with the town to coordinate an opportunity for people to come and visit that facility.
Yeah, I think that would go a long way. It would make your job a lot easier.
20 megawatts, right?
It's 20 megawatts. The alternative is you could come down to Texas.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to come to Texas where we have 100 megawatt facilities. Genuinely, you guys want to make a trip to Texas, you can come to any of our 14 projects nationwide, we'd be happy to have you.
Really huge.
There's gonna be a group of us that come.
Yeah.
We're grateful for that. All right. So Shabina has 2 people, I believe, one bringer. Okay.
Hi. Exactly how big is this facility? Is it, somebody said it like the size of 10 football fields?
So, I don't know how many acres are in the football field, but the actual.
That's a massive, that's not like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
small project.
the actual footprint of the facility itself is gonna be about 6 acres. And when I say the footprint, I mean the limited disturbance where the fence is and the grading that happens outside the fence. Then we have some additional acreage that's used for running the power line over.
I'm just saying,
access roads.
this is not just a little, this is a huge.
4.54 football fields for the entire property. That doesn't include the equipment, that's the entire property, you said, right?
And that's so close to the schools and the parks and the horses where they have a big, facility down there where people come from all over with the horses. Has any environmental impact statements been done by you guys?
Yeah, so again, we filed our permit application with the planning board. And
No, an environment, an impact to the community, like the effect on housing and like the property values, soil and water.
It's a different study as far as, but environmental impact,
So we need to
full
have an
environmental impact study has been.
So we should have an environmental impact study done to see the concerns of leakage into the into the Hudson River, I mean, it could go into our.
That
wastewater,
information is
our
included,
soil.
that information is included in our permit
And
application.
didn't Warwick have 3 fires in just 2 years? And they closed their facility, and that's a tiny little one.
Yeah, so, I can't talk about specific incidents, right? If they're subject to
And
active
that's closed in December, right, in 2025?
So,
Last
I know
year.
exactly what happened at both Warwick incidents. The problem is, guys, is like there's a lot of lawyers in the world. We weren't involved in that, right? But there's active litigation related to that, just like the water incident in Long Island that somebody else referenced. I can't comment on what happened on other people's facilities. All I can tell you is that the technology and what happened is different than what we're proposing here, but I can't comment on specific incidents. And to be honest, even if the town brings in the world's best fire consultant, they can't talk about it either because it's still under active litigation. We can talk, generally speaking, what can happen or what's happened in the past, but I can't get into specifics because it's not my project and there's lawyers
I
involved.
think a relevant point on this topic though is, was that facility constructed under the current fire code with
No.
all the right labs, benefit and all of that?
No, it also, I gotta decide whether or not this is
careful,
publicly
be careful.
available information. It also was the serial number 1 issue, right? So if you look at the equipment that was publicly named to have been used there, and you look at the factory it came out of, they were literally the first ones off the factory line. And so you remember when we talked about how we don't do that? That's one of those reasons. They thought they had a safe design, there was a defect in it, they discovered it, and now there's several thousand of those of that exact model operating in the United States safely because they fixed the issue. That company's also out of business, for what it's worth.
Fair enough, alright.
Yep.
Someone else had a question? Do you have a microphone?
Back in the back.
Alright, Mike, go ahead with your last question and then we'll give a microphone to you.
Yep.
In reference to your emergency response plan,
Yes, sir.
I'm curious whether you're planning to have a number of mutual aid associations, both east and west of your location. Now, secondly, that if you are,
Sorry, what is the question there?
the question is, you're gonna have an emergency response plan.
Yes.
Is it gonna identify specific agencies to respond?
Yeah, it's
Or
required,
has it-
however, when it comes to mutual aid, that's the incident commander's decision about whether or not they need that resource. That does go into that plan, and we will trade any mutual aid organization that's interested.
The reason I asked that question is, a few months ago, Kingston was identified
Yep.
as the responder, and I live right down the road from Chief here. The wind direction here is westward to east.
Mentioning Kingston, I don't know, we've been engaging with the fire department locally for a while. If somebody mentioned Kingston, it was an error, that's not.
All right, you can see my confusion.
What was said was Kingston's a hazmat response team. And
Oh,
then
yeah, yeah.
Breaches a hazmat response team.
Yeah.
Right, so my concern is, with winds being westerly, Kingston might have some difficulty as the principal hazmat team. Is there some kind of provision to be made to take care of my fellow firefighters, to have the right equipment and the right training? Specifically, I've done a lot of training for HAZWOPER. I know a level A suit. You kind of touched it lightly when you said SCBA and there might be necessity for certain of these agencies to have some level A suits. The final question then is, does the town absorb that cost or who does it?
Sure. So once again, I'm not gonna speak on behalf of the chief, but I can tell you what is settled fire science, and that's what I said earlier. Normal turnout gear is all that is required. If normal turnout gear is not available, we do help fund that. There's also things to monitor, I think like downwind, like you alluded to a little bit with Kingston. If there's not a 4-gas monitor, we will buy a 4-gas monitor. So if there's a
HF.
What's that?
Specific to HF.
Correct, yeah. You want monitor COHF, that's fine. To your question on Kingston being downwind, that is 100% not an issue. Wind is our friend, wind is not the enemy. Hydrogen fluoride is at its highest concentration at the source. The way that this gets modeled and what you'll see in our plume study is the wind, certainly far away from Kingston, you're not going to detect hydrogen fluoride, not in Kingston. Right? To do what in your mind?
To respond. They will respond.
And do what?
To respond.
So,
No, that's not.
I'll touch on that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
If the incident rises to a point point where we would need the hazmat team, we would call them. Right now, currently, as we stand, we have the equipment to monitor. We have four gas meters that do hydrogen fluoride, carbon dioxide. We have sulfur and what's the,
So it's sulfur dioxide's in there, but that's in most fires, yeah.
So we have that equipment already, okay? What we would see with one of these fires would not necessarily raise to a hazmat incident because of the way the battery burns and the off-gassing. The tractor trailer rolling over yesterday, dumped 55 gallons of fuel on the ground, that's a hazmat incident. We're also equipped to take care of that without the city of Kingston being there. The propane truck that flipped over, which is a severe threat to life and property, we called Kingston in for that because we aren't necessarily trained to go in and shut valves down and take care of a leak of that magnitude. That's a major evacuation event because propane stays low. And the only thing to do is pour water on that and fan it out so the IDLH goes down and there's not a major threat.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, most of the incident reports that I've read, and I've read out 100 of them worldwide, I mean, the hazmat team doesn't get called out unless that fire department doesn't know what's there and they do it out of an abundance of caution. So normal firefighters properly trained with normal turnout gear is what you'll typically see.
Okay, thank you.
My question is, has the accumulated exposure to constant noise and how it affects the nervous system of everybody from babies to elders, has that been measured?
Not for energy storage, but at the decibel levels and the tonal qualities that we do, yeah, people have done those studies. So if you were to take the decibel and the tonal qualities that are in the sound study that we filed, I'm sure you could find any number of studies to look at that. That being said, the background level of noise was already like the 50 decibel range, and at the nearest sensitive receptor, the nearest home, you're in the 50 decibel range. That goes to that idea where 50 plus 50 is actually 53. The space and the distance and the dispersion of sound is what makes it such that it's not that much higher than background levels. But I would encourage you, if you're interested in this topic, to dig into the numbers that are actually there and kind of look at that relative to studies that have been done on the internet relative to the effects of noise and make your own conclusions on that.
Am I understanding correctly that this is going to be put near homes and school?
No.
No? Okay, I thought I heard someone say that.
I think near is relative, right?
1 mile.
That's a really long way in our world. I know that there were people.
Not my world. A mile?
Can you explain to me your concerns about having an energy storage facility 1 mile from there? Any different than say like a Walmart within 1 mile? Both can catch fire. The smoke that comes off of both of them is toxic and contains similar constituents. What's the specific concern?
Just how it affects people. I just want to understand how it's going to affect
Sure.
people to have a constant noise going on. And I think it's pretty significant.
Yeah, it's not constant for what it's worth. We measure the worst case scenario, and that's what we model, but it's not constant.
Perfect, thank you. I want to take a moment to thank everybody. It's been a pretty long night. You guys are great. Great kid.
Thank you all for the respectful questions. We appreciate your engagement.
Before we let you go, Ms. Baxter has a question.
Oh,
And
sorry.
I'll give you guys a chance to close your.
I'm last.
Yes.
Joel, you spoke earlier about the, in response to questions about the why here, the why in Saugerties, and the specifics of the grid's needs regionally, and that this, I would say, sounds like a puzzle piece that fits in to
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
to meet those needs. You talked about selecting the site for those criteria.
Right.
So didn't the project start though with an RFP process from Central Hudson?
What is that?
No.
It didn't, they didn't originate,
No. Usually that comes much later. You would only request to respond to a request for a proposal from like somebody like Central Hudson if you already have a project. Because what Central Hudson and other utilities that run RFPs like that, and I don't know the specific one you're talking about, They want to see that you already have land, you already have your entitlements, and you already have a tenable electrical interconnection. Then they will pick you up, for a contract to use the services your battery can provide. It doesn't usually happen the other way around, but no, that's not how this project started.
Okay, I'm asking just because in terms of the why and the regionality of it, I thought that that the utility would be in a position to, but you have access to the same information that they do, apparently.
We do, yeah.
But I just wanted to add one thing which you didn't mention, which is the bottleneck of the grid north of us. And isn't that part of the demand issue here, that the power that's created cheaply, is it from hydro sources north of us, that can't get down south to the New York City metro area because of a situation of the grid, and so therefore the Hudson Valley has become very desirable, right, for the development of BESS because of that bottleneck. And I just wondered if that was.
And that is part of it. So NYSO did do a study last year that recognized that downstate is going to start having severe shortages in coming years, unless that bottleneck and some other issues are therefore cured. And this is part of that process. As we noted before, it's not the silver bullet. You need scattered, what do they call it, silver buckshot in order to solve these problems. So that is part of it. And I just want to, I'm going to guess here, but you might be conflating a number of different issues on your thoughts of that RFP. So Central Hudson has made some upgrades to the substation up there already that are not associated with our project, not as part of their long-term planning. And part of that long-term planning, they're going to keep doing incremental upgrades to that substation into the surrounding areas as they transition their system from 69 kV to 115 kV. And when they do those upgrades, they're typically issuing part of an RFP to different companies to perform some of the work. Additionally, NYSERDA in 2024 released an RFP for contracting with energy storage projects specifically. And this project, we did enter into that RFP. We already request for proposals. And so when a government or a quasi-like government entity wants to do some kind of a major project, typically they're required to release a request for proposals. It's a competitive process. A number of companies come in and they say, this is what we have to offer at this cost, and then they go through the proposals and they choose the best bids. And our project, this project here in Saugerties, did win a contract for basically providing energy storage services to the grid with NYSERDA, and so this is one of the projects that was selected for that.
Yeah, you're probably right. Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you.
And thank you all very much, and if you have additional questions, I'm not entirely sure what the mechanism is, but we'd be glad to entertain if there's great questions that come in.
Really appreciate your willingness to be here to answer questions. How do you measure the total noise? Suzanne, thank you.
Talked about
Suzanne, you want to come up? Straighten them up a little bit down. If not, don't worry about it. Folks, I know it's been a long night. Suzanne Bennett is with us. One of the folks that is a little bit under-celebrated in the artist community is Augusta Savage. This year is significant. Suzanne leads Shout Out Saugerties, and they have, they have a significant itinerary of events to celebrate her life here in Saugerties and some of the work she's done. And she's going to briefly share some of that with us. That's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. So.
Thanks a lot. 2 years ago, we did a tribute to Augusta Savage at the Orpheum, and it was.
All right, let's be respectful of Suzanne, please. Let's be respectful of Suzanne.
Sorry, this is a major channel switch here. If you play a little Duke Ellington in your head, you would be ready for this. So yes, so two years ago we did a tribute to Augusta Savage at the Orpheum, and we were pleased at the turnout and the enthusiasm of people. And as I have to say, I feel now that I was a little naive in what I knew about her at the time, other than that she was a major figure in the Harlem Renaissance and then had moved to Saugerties in the 1950s and lived here for over 15 years, although a lot of history said she retired to the idyllic upstate New York State and then was heard of no more and sort of stopped her work. Well, that just simply is not true. And the more we've been researching, the more we found how active she was in Saugerties, and wanted them to do another event and hope that eventually we might even have something like Augusta Savage Day annually every year. She's become much more, one of the things that had triggered our interest was the PBS Masterpiece series, and they had filmed some of that in Saugerties at the house that she lived in off Old Route 32. And so, you know, we knew that, but not too much else about what she had done here. And we discovered, as we were doing research, that she was extremely active, very active, for example, in the Advent Lutheran Church, teaching Sunday school, giving lectures, that she gave lectures around a lot of places on the arts, that she continued to teach sculpture, that she sculpted a number of local people. And I'm very happy to say that some of those families, in fact, are loaning us some of the busts that she had sculpted for them that we will show in the art exhibit that we're going to have this year, along with an event at the Orpheum. So we'll be doing two parts. This time we'll do the event at the Orpheum, and we'll have a number of events there, including, we discovered that while she was here, she was doing a lot of writing. She was writing short stories, which I found when I was doing research at the Schoenberg Center in New York, and got copies, was able to get copies of those stories, and so we'll be reading some excerpts from those. We're going to read from also this wonderful biography of her that Marilyn Nelson wrote, The Shape of a Sculptor's Life, and I'm really pleased that Sharon Washington, the TV, stage, film actress, is going to come and do that reading for us. She's right now in the La Cage aux Folles in the city, and a really wonderful actress. And then we're doing, later in that day, we're doing the art opening, and we have 4 artists that we'll be featuring there, whose careers are all influenced by Augusta Savage. And then we'll also have some sculptures of Saugerties residents and of the bus that I was talking about, and enhanced photos of places, of sites that she went when she was around here. We just had Michael Nelson just did some drone photography for us of the area where she lived, and so we're looking forward to showing that also at the event. And just, pardon? What's the date? Oh, the date, that's a good, a good point. It's August 1st, Augusta on August 1st, and at the Orpheum will be 1 to 3, and then the art exhibit will be at the Lamb Center, and that will, the reception will start at 4 o'clock. It will run through the month of August on the weekend. But I just wanted to say that shortly before I came, that we've sent out notices around, and I got a call from the Vice President of Monumental Women, which is an organization that got the statues in Central Park of Sojourner
Truth?
Sojourner Truth, thank you. Yes, a little different here. And Susan B. Anthony. And they were hoping to do something with Augusta Savage, and were delighted with the programming that we were doing, and mentioned that they wanted to send a delegation here to come to our event, and wanted to support us. And I was telling them also about what is on view at SUNY Ulster, which is a big mural of her replicating her most famous sculpture, which was called the Harp, which was at the 1939 World's Fair, and she's probably best known for that. But she also was head of the committee for a monument to honor the war dead in Corryville, at the Corryville Community Church in the 1950s. And this is just an idea of the kind of involvement that she had in the community as an artist. And so we're very proud that she was here and that she's contributed and that people are showing a lot of interest. And we hope that the town will do a kind of commemoration of this event or her, that I know is sometimes done. So I'm asking that for the board, that you will have something official that will commemorate this event and to be discussed by all of you. Anyway, and I hope if you have any questions or you want, I have a few flyers here if you want to see them, then I have those. Okay, thank you.
We have a number of speakers who signed up. I'm going to ask you to be to the point, because it is quite late. Barbara Budick is the first speaker who signed up to speak. Are we open to that's a motion tonight to do a resolution on August 1st, being Saturday? We open to that resolution this evening, we'll add it in that second for August 1st. Yes? I know, she's coming up.
I don't need the microphone, believe me.
Okay.
I know. My name is Barbara Budick, and I live at 1088 Kings Highway in Saugerties, and I would like to speak in support of Black Walnut Farms and their petition to join the town road at Tissel Road. As a neighbor and a fellow chamber member, I think it's important to look at the benefits of this for the community at large too. 15 years ago, I had the pleasure of being part of a group that brought water and sewer to the Kings Highway under another town board's members and supervisor. It was designated the Saugerties Economic Development Zone, and tonight I'm asking this board to take the point on that project and move it along, because it now will need municipality support for funding and overall connection to the state and county. With the water and sewer, we were able to call in our local politicians and our county support and state and federal, and I'm asking you to do that again tonight for this particular project. Now would be a good time, like ASAP, and that's what I'm asking.
Okay, thank you.
Suggesting and probably pursuing that course for the duration, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a promise, that's it.
Hi, Barbara. I'm not clear on what the ask is, that the project itself is about, you're describing about the road?
Black Walnut Farms right
Yes.
now is a wedding venue, and they're utilizing a private crossing with hired crossing guards, no gates, and the danger is there for that particular crossing. They want to connect to Tissel Road. That's a gated crossing. I was part of that too. And to make it safer for everyone, but Northeast Solate is located on that road also. So in asking Northeast Solate, who is also a chamber member, they offered free land to the town to take that project and take control of that project and ownership of the land to alleviate that danger. The trucks coming out, the people coming out of the wedding venue, the residents in the back, and the other people to the north who are also utilizing private ungated crossings. this would be a kind of a stepping stone to that also, but the immediate danger right now, the immediate importance of this is keeping Black Walnut Farms online, and of course Northeast Solite online, but not creating any more danger there.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
We have preliminary drawings on this topic from the engineer that was working with Black Walnut Farm. Yeah, we have a preliminary drawing, suggested proposal from the operator of Black Walnut Farm. Their application is before the planning board as we speak. I think the path forward that is the leading scenario for this year is to ask for indemnification from Black Walnut Farm on an annual basis that will give them the opportunity to fulfill the obligations they have for people who signed up to use the wedding venue this year, and then use that period of time to memorialize what changes need to be made, bring all the stakeholders together, and make a proper intersection off of Thistle Road. There's still a significant amount of planning that's not done. So we are unfortunately a little bit away from any construction, and then of course the question of financing will come into play. But once we have a resolved plan, then we can reach out to our funding support and try to assist with the cost of that project. And I think there is a compelling argument that Ms. Budick shared between multiple users and in the interest of safety. Certainly guests coming to Saugerties for an event, a wedding, or some other celebratory event. We do not want that scarred by an unfortunate accident at a dangerous crossing. So we're going to continue to work closely with Mr. Glaub and his wife to make sure that they have the opportunity to continue to operate, but we need to further along this planning stage to make it more of a reality. We can't just go ask our funding sources, hey, can you give us some money? We want to try to build something. We need to know what we're asking for. And that's where we are in the plan right now. Does that answer your question a little bit? Okay. All right. Any further comment on that? Thank you, Barbara, for bringing it up. Appreciate it. All right. Mr. Hofstadter?
Oh, sorry, you stopped working.
No.
I think a lot of these folks left, so we're going to get to you.
I just wanted to finish off.
About 30 names on here, and there's not 30 people in the room.
Well, that'll be my first subject. Consideration of the board by the list of speakers that have asked to speak before giving a free for all to everybody that's behind them on the list. Just be considerate of that in the future. I came to talk about Bluestone Park. We've got a current problem going on there right now that these guys have been working on. I'm hoping for some resolution soon, but we have long-standing problems there as well. We've got our long history of poor water quality and a ton of silt. I've been to this board before a couple of years ago after our 10,000 gallon backup tank collapsed. I came in February after that. That was in 2023. I came in 2024 in February. Approached the board about that. I was told that the ARPA funds were going to be used to replace the tank.
Yep.
And the filtration system was in design. In November, unfortunately, I had a family death, and I could not make it to the meeting, but I sent a whole letter to the board, and including the county, the state, everybody actually, about trying to address those items. Nothing ever showed up. I asked in the letter to please bring it up at the board meeting, and nothing ever showed up in the minutes, so I don't know if anything was done from the board's standpoint there. So I'm still looking for help in that area and where we stand on that stuff, in addition to where we're at with the current problem, and looking for some resolutions.
Okay, so Mr. Avino and Mr. Hansel have been elbow deep in this. I've been there myself. With regard to the current matter, we believe that sweat from the pipe that brings water up from the well has been infiltrating the electrical systems, correct? And we have come up with a plan to mitigate that and to correct any damage that has already occurred as a result of that. That didn't happen overnight. I believe that is something we inherited, given the level of corrosion we saw in some of the parts. It's been something that's been going on
I'm familiar
quite
with
a while.
it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but we are where we are, and we'll certainly be going to do our best to rectify that. Mr. Ivino and I met with the engineer a few months back, and we memorialized the plan for the replacement of the tank and with the town engineer. And we did allocate a percentage of our money to cover that cost, which is good news. We do not have a handle on the cost for what needs to be done regarding the problems with the electric system.
Any input on the filtration system?
I don't have any update on the filtration. Do you? No, okay.
We can add that to our conversation with Lanier and Larios to keep pushing that along.
Because they were supposed to be doing the design work. And that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't have a concrete answer on that part. The other two issues I believe, have a pretty good handle on. And hopefully before the end of for the electrical part, within weeks, right?
Yeah. The electrical part should be solidified and taken care of by the end of the month.
hopefully we'll have potable water.
You should have potable water tomorrow. There's a test that
Yeah,
John
so
will
as long
run.
as the samples that we sent out today come back good, just like the ones we sent out yesterday came back good, then we can look to boil water across rate. But until then, I have to keep it in place.
All right, keep me informed.
Okay.
A question, is the filtration something required by Department of Health? I mean, you've been using the water supply without it, right?
Well, most of the people don't drink it, they can't drink it.
Oh, sorry.
They can't drink it. They don't drink it
Okay.
because the water quality is poor. But according to the county tests, it's drinkable.
Potable.
Okay, so it's just a borderline, like,
Well,
taste.
it's not borderline, I mean, even the boiled water that we're using right now out of the system, you boil it and you end up with a layer that big of crap at the bottom, just in a little pot like that. I mean, that's the way it's been.
And that's passing health department test?
Yeah, the part of the issue is we are blessed as municipal users in this part of town to have the reservoir, which is very much spring fed, but also has a filtration system to handle turbidity and purify the water before it goes into the distribution system. In Bluestone Park's case, the water is collected from 2 ponds, which have a high level of organic matter in them, and those tastes transfer, and some of the sediment that's affiliated with your high organic matter transfers into the system. It is safe and disinfected, but it does carry that higher level of turbidity. And from an engineering perspective, there hasn't been an effective solution that we can employ at this point.
But we are being charged at the rate based on getting water from the reservoir, so people know that, or go to the board.
Yeah, the economic part of that is curious. I mean, you're a very small district, you collect like $20,000 a year. We're gonna spend $5,000 or $6,000 rectifying this current issue. So it's probably more expensive to make that water potable than it is what we pay the village. Not complaining, we're one big family, and we're going to continue to treat it that way. But it's, there's some unique challenges to that district.
I understand.
Okay. All right, thank you. How are you? Good. All right, who's on next? Deborah Sanchez, who's she left? Stephen Brady. Eileen Ryan. Janet Grillo. Dia Monsbach, she left. Elizabeth Strum. Okay.
If you can stand another thing on BESS. I want to thank you very much for having Key Capture do such a great presentation. I'm a resident of Saugerties, and I'm also a volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby. And I'm glad that the town is considering this project and looking at it carefully. I'm of course concerned about climate and taking the big picture as we get hotter. It seems hotter and hotter every summer and have these huge heat waves. That it's really important to shore up the grid just for everyone's safety. It's best if it's not just Saugerties, but Ulster, New Paltz, Tipsy, LaGrange. We need it all, but I really think that we will be safer with battery energy storage and not less safe. Thank you very much.
So we just offered reminders. I was thinking when one of the questions was asked about, why just here? And I'm like, well, it's really not just here, because you listed 5 or 6 communities that all are facing at least a battery, perhaps 2 in some instances. And if you go to the east side of the Hudson River, there's a number of communities that are also facing challenges in trying to bring this into the fold. It's new. There's a lot of concern, I think, because of that. But we're trying to do our best to get some real information out there and have people's concerns addressed in the most meaningful way we can. And I'm grateful. I will give them credit for this. They deserve it. When you bring a project before the planning board, there's a quasi-legal component to that. And I think many times their advisors will tell them not to talk about the projects while it's being deliberated. Very much like a court case. And for those folks to make the gesture and come here and speak freely the way they did, I very much appreciate it. And I thought that was very courteous of them to make that extraordinary gesture to the community and give us the opportunity to hopefully learn a little bit and get a better understanding of it in its entirety.
Right. Thanks. Thank you.
Bill Farrow. Catherine Court. Janet.
Let's just ask the people who are still here.
Mark Sidgwick. All right, did I not call on someone who would like to address the board?
I just wanted to make sure that you were all personally invited to the artist studio tours that are happening August 8th and 9th. We have 46 artists opening their homes and studios, and it's a lot of fun. So if you there's maps sort of all over the village, and there'll be signage. We have to show up in the barn right now behind the Kierstead House on the weekends. That can give you a preview of all the different artists, so you can kind of cherry pick the work that you like. But just wanted to make sure you had a personal invite.
Thank you for doing that, and we wish all these folks luck.
It was a very good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Anyone else want to address the board? John, would you like to give a report?
No.
Does anybody on the board feel compelled to give a report?
Oh, I have a couple of things.
Very good.
Just
I'm sorry, I have a personal issue. I have to make a quick phone call.
Okay.
Okay, vulnerability assessment, climate.
Yes.
Is appropriate. We covered the smoke from Canada. So I'll be scheduling, with your help, a meeting of department heads to discuss issues around vulnerability assessment with our Cornell Technical. This is it'll be a 2-hour meeting. We'd like to get them all together at one meeting and get it done at one time. I just wanted to add, I mentioned it to you earlier, I'm a library liaison. There are 2 positions open on the library board up for renewal, for re-election, so anybody can run. And they voted a 2027 draft budget. They'll be having some hearings on that, but they approved it, and they voted to override the tax cap to 5% increase. And so that may be a little controversial. We'll see how that goes. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone in the community who came out on July 3rd and supported the Food Truck Festival that kicked off the 4th of July weekend. It was probably 110 degrees at the field, but it was a great band, great food trucks, and the biggest news of all was so many people coming up and saying, "We can't believe Saugerties got the grant for the splash pad." That was the big news of the evening. As many of you know, we received the state grant for over $605,000, which puts us in the position to have a splash pad for next year's 4th of July celebration that will benefit everybody in this community. So it's a win-win for Saugerties. Also, the TV23, our program director, Bronwyn, is here filming tonight. She's had a very busy last 2 weeks getting acclimated to the studio, has a lot of great potential program ideas. So you'll be seeing a lot more of her throughout the community, filming and working with various committees and groups and various activities, like the studio art tour coming up. The staff committee will be meeting in August. I'm happy to report that Supervisor Costello and I met with Highway Superintendent Maloney and our town engineer Dennis Larios via phone to discuss finalizing the plans for the Simmons Street project, which, if you remember from last year, we talked about in the staff committee recommendation closing off the end of Simmons Street where Avon comes out by the shopping center there, and putting a street on the town property near the, I guess it's near the gas station. So it would be over Boss Street, and then the new road will bring traffic out onto 9W and avoid the intersection where there's been multiple accidents and fender benders over the years. At the end of Simmons, that will be closed off with, probably trees, grass, shrubs, whatever, and people in that area will be going down Simmons and have a choice of 2 other exits to get out onto 9W. So hopefully it'll alleviate the congestion on that section of that particular highway.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Avino? Okay. All right, I'll ask for approval of minutes, pre-board meeting of 6/17/26, town board meeting of 6/17/26. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Ask for approval of bills. General fund, $180,302.85. General outside village, $9,924.97. Highway, $86,384.35. Ambulance district, $139,734.42. Sewer operation and maintenance, $1,753.45. Water operation and maintenance, $1,739.45. Malden Sewer, $3,492.90. Central Hudson, $34,277,000.74. Total is $457,460.23. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Parr. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Go on to motions and resolutions. I'd like to make a motion to approve the standard workday and reporting resolution as on file for elected and appointed officials as requested by the New York State Retirement System. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Avino. Discussion. This is a little bit of housekeeping as board members get elected or re-elected. New York State requires them, if they join the pension system, to provide a schedule of their activities, and they keep that on file. If someone reaches retirement age, that will be the foundation for the benefit they get there. Any further discussion? Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mrs. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Motion to approve the grant disbursement agreement for DASNY, grant 28341, in the amount of $100,000 to be used to pay for costs incurred in building the new Saugerties Animal Shelter, and to authorize Supervisor Costello to sign documents required by this grant.
Second. Discussion. We are in full phase construction at the animal shelter. We have, by spending money and completing components of the building, we are becoming eligible to be reimbursed for some of the grant awards we received in support of that project. This is one of those, and we look forward to a quick, hopefully, turnaround and get those monies back in our hand. Any further discussion? Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mrs. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes.
I'd like to make a motion to move animal shelter employee Claire Rupert from part-time to full-time effective immediately as per the recommendation of the animal shelter manager, animal control officer.
Second. Discussion. Claire's been with us for a little while as a part-timer. We have had a very busy season, or year, quite frankly, and she is willing to become full-time. Her additional services will be helpful in alleviating the workload of all of her coworkers. Any further discussion? Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mrs. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to promote Aaron Reynolds from the rank of patrolman to the rank of detective with a weekly stipend of $88.66, effective July 6, 2026.
Second. Discussion. We are gradually restoring our roster at the police station. As we do that, we are able to fill positions that have been held open for quite a long time. Everyone knows some of the unfortunate instances that we've suffered. Aaron has stepped up and assisted the detective division since July 6th in helping prepare those documents and prepare the court cases that correspond to those incidents. So confident in his abilities, and we think bringing him in and making that department back at full staff will be helpful. Any further discussion? I do just want to add one thing. What we have for detectives, we rely heavily on outside agencies for support. In those instances that I referenced, we had support from the county and the state in both of those instances, and the district attorney's office. So those relationships are very important, especially when you get those extraordinary events. Any further discussion? Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mrs. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes. I'd like to make a motion to move Jeff Jason from the position of volunteer police officer to the position of part-time police officer at a rate of $30 per hour, effective July 20th, 26.
Second.
Discussion. Jeff is available to help out. We are restoring our roster, but we still depend on some part-time staff to complement our full-time forces. He's ready to go, and we think his presence on our roster will be helpful. Any further discussion? Mr. Parr?
I vote yes.
Mrs. Fleury?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Motion to add to the summer youth recreation program with pay rates consistent with the previously approved salary schedule. Brian Brighthop, Medical Director. Laura Percivalli, Medical Director. Lucia Vasquez, Sports Director, as per the recommendation of Summer Youth Recreation Director.
Second.
Discussion? I think they will speak for themselves because they keep the titles. Any further discussion? Mr. Barr?
I vote yes.
Mrs. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes.
I'd like to make a motion to add to the summer youth recreation program's waiting list and the department's call-out list Anna Mills, Wiley Smith, Zeomira Marquardt, Carter Nelson, as per the recommendations of the summer youth recreation director and the Parks and Building superintendent.
Second.
Discussion? We've been open this is our second full week. We only have 4 full weeks left after this week. And depending on the roster of employees, sometimes we need some fill-in staff, but also if we get extra kids, we have to meet the criteria to have the right ratio between counselor and student. Any further discussion? Mr. Barr?
I vote yes.
Mrs. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes. I'd like to make a motion to authorize the supervisor to adopt a resolution declaring August 1st Augusta Savage Day in the town of Saugerties.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Avino. We discussed this in pre-board after a brief conversation with Mrs. Bennett, who shared some of the activities that are going to be held to memorialize Augusta Savage time with us. We'll prepare a resolution celebrating some of those high points and be able to present that during one of the events. Any further discussion? Mr. Barr?
I vote yes.
Mrs. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Avino?
Yes.
I vote yes. Did I miss anything? You want to try again for a workshop? Yeah, or just easy. No. All right. So our next scheduled meeting will be Wednesday, August 12th, Town Board Workshop at 6 p.m. Wednesday, August 12th, 2026, pre-board meeting at 6:30 p.m. and Town Board meeting at 7 p.m. Did I forget anything? Yes. Before we let you go, we would like you to share a moment of silence in the number of residents who recently passed. There you go. Okay. John Harris, Peter Marcello, Bob Saturn, Jamie Fine, Roger Meyer, Pam Christiana, and John Losani. So please take a brief moment of silence with us all. Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, second. All right, thank you, Bill, for your help. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe month. We'll see you again.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.